Okay, and we're recording. We're on today. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode. I have two of my coolest contacts on Twitter with me, Carl Zha and Teen Sheng, back again. Both have been on my show before. Hey, guys, how you doing today?
Hey,
hi, how are you?
Good. Yeah. So we've got some cowbells or something like that in the background on Carl's side, which is giving us a little bit of a spiritual feel to this episode.
Those are the wind chimes on the farmer's rice field, just outside my door. They're scared because the rice are getting ready to harvest. So the farmers want to scare away all the birds.
Nice. Well, it's nice. It sounds good. I've got less pleasant noise. I've got construction noise all around me. So I'm going to turn my mic off from time to time. If I forget to turn it back on and I'm not coming through, just remind me. Say Mike. But I think we should be good. It's subsided a bit. But today we're joining together to talk a little bit about anti-Asian racism, especially in the U.S., where it's really played out in a pretty serious way. The number of attacks on Asian Americans have gone up. Teen, you're over in the U.S., so we're going to have some pretty interesting insight for us in terms of what it's like to be there. Carl, you used to live in the U.S., and you've been following this topic closely. And the topic of racism is something in general that I've covered a lot as well. So I think maybe what we can do, just to get the topic going, is obviously talk about the big item. The big item is the mass shooting that happened. And just looking at the discourse that happened around it was just really amazing, where people were trying to really kind of seem like frantically say that, no, this isn't racism related, without even the facts that they were saying. No, we listened to the killer. The killer said it wasn't about racism. Oh, okay. So we're gonna listen to the killer about what his motives were. But you tweeted something, Carl, that was quite interesting, and I'll start off with this video, and then you can talk a little bit about it, about how appalling you found it. So we're going to start with the police statement after the shooting, and I'm going to play that video now.
For the investigators, they interviewed him this morning, and they got that impression that, yes, he understood the gravity of it, and he was pretty much fed up and kind of at the end of his rope, and yesterday was a really bad day for him, and this is what he did.
Remorseful?
I'm not going to go to, I don't know if he was remorseful or not.
He's a pretty young guy. Was he
I mean, there was more than that, but what was your reaction when you saw that? And you want to talk about that clip a little bit, Carl?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't say I'm surprised. When in 2021, when there's a mass shooting where 6 Asian women were killed, and the police sheriff would say something like, "Oh, he's just having a bad day." I mean, like, if any kind of and the best part at that time, I was just shaking my head. I just retweeted. I thought this was ridiculous. But then the newspaper, I think it was BuzzFeed, they dug up on the background of the sheriff, and sure enough, he was found to post on his Facebook promoting the T-shirt. Go get the T-shirt that says COVID-19, the China virus. Right. I mean,
with China misspelled. Yeah. That's these. I've got them here on the screen. Pretty incredible.
So you can read it in the Trump, China style.
Yeah, China. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Kind of celebrating the way that he did that. I mean, the World Health Organization was talking about a long time about, calling this the China virus and the implications of that. It was in 2015. They decided that we're not going to name viruses after peoples or places anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, and that was from the implications to pigs. It was, when the swine flu came out, and everybody was calling it the swine flu. Governments were culling pigs all around the world, and it also created religious tensions between, Muslims looking at the dirty Christians who eat, pork and stuff like that. And it created this big divide where they were like, you know what? If this is what happens to pigs when we are naming it after an animal, imagine what happens when we name it after a group of people. I mean, it's pretty obvious what happens. Yet these people, we have a name for this virus. A lot of people are calling it COVID-19. That's the actual disease of the virus, SARS-CoV, or, whatever it is, the technical name. But these people are trying so hard and putting so much effort into saying, no, we want to call it the China virus. So it absolutely is racially motivated. But that was, that was interesting and probably gives a little bit of context, because I agree with you. I think if that was a black person, if that killer was a black person, for some reason, I really doubt that he would be up there saying, you know what, this is a guy, he just had a bad day and, made a bad decision. Like, he seems like really sympathetic towards him in his speech.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's really fed up. And
that's actually...
Go ahead, T.
Yeah, go ahead, T.
Your hypothetical is actually kind of interesting, and I think it's pointing to kind of an interesting problem that's going on with this, because this happened in Georgia, in suburban Atlanta, and that's seen as it's a southern state. It's typically southern states are typically more racist, more conservative, and so the racial attitudes there are more anti-black, more pro-white. But the statement that he made about him just having had a bad day was kind of echoed by Chesa Boudin, who is the DA in San Francisco. And when they killed Vicha Ratanapakdee, who's the 84-year-old Thai American man who sort of got tackled, on his walk, and he died. That was a little bit more complicated, because the attacker in that case was a young black man. And in a city like San Francisco, and this is where there's a lot of complications, is when you have sort of racial minority on racial minority crime, the politics of it are just as complicated, if not more complicated. And so with Chesa Boudin, I know that a lot of the Asian American leaders in San Francisco, and Dion Lim, the reporter at the local news, I think for ABC, was calling him out because he had said something similar, saying that he wasn't sure that there was any racial motivation. And we can talk about the racial motivation parts. That's kind of interesting too. But he said it looks like he had a temper tantrum. And so it's I think with Atlanta it fits, especially for like a more liberal progressive sect people. It's a easier to understand story, and in a way, the pushback from this white sheriff to say like, we didn't see any racial motivation. The media, it seems to has gotten ahead of that a little bit, and it was a typical local yokel sheriff denies racial connection, and then the liberal, more enlightened media comes in and questions that, and then eventually President Biden and the Vice President Harris flew down there. And the DOJ, there's probably going to be pressure on the DOJ to bring federal charges. So, sorry, I guess what I'm saying is that the whole thing, it's very complicated. And the Atlanta incident was one of the ones that sort of simplified it a little bit. And I think that's one of the reasons why it became a very big story.
Yeah, I think
right.
A lot of the liberal media, they try to pin everything on Trump. Acting like, this is not really America. This is just the Trump's America, right? And but we all know as Asian Americans, the racism existed in the United States for a long, long time, and it never went away. And when I was posting, I was just making a comment on Twitter. There are so many of my white followers suddenly jump out and say, there's racism everywhere. I'm like, look, I'm talking about incident where 6 Asian women have been killed. Why do you choose this context to reply to me about there's racism everywhere? Are you? So I literally reply. I mean, are you trying to say all life matters? That's what they do. It's like they try to minimize what's happening to the Asian American group.
That's the other thing they try to do too, is they talk about the other 2 people, and of course, it's a tragedy for everybody involved. But they're saying, 2 of the people were not Asian, so this is not an Asian issue. This is not never mind. He drove from one Asian centric business, Asian-owned spa. He drove 40 minutes to another one, passing all kinds of other adult entertainment, venues, to another Asian spa. To kill more people. I mean, it's pretty obvious. And I think the fact that if this guy had they talk about him having a sex addiction, this is not what you do when you have a sex addiction, as far as I'm aware. And I think there was some people who actually study this chimed in on it as well. But the fact that when he had this problem, and he chose to visit Asian related kind of businesses for this. Again, there's something important to note here also, that we're not 100% sure if these women were involved in anything like that. And we're approaching this
Correct.
conversation because
Correct.
everybody,
Yes.
everybody kind of assumes that. That's another battle to have, which is unfortunate. But using the assumptions that everybody has, that these were sex workers, even if it's wrong, and that's unfortunate. And again, that's another topic. The fact that this is who he went to in order to satisfy his kind of, addiction or whatever it is telling also. I mean, you have, there were a lot of really interesting articles about how a lot of white supremacists have Asian wives. And there's a whole thing about it. It is this thing of dominance. You've got movies that popularized phrases like, me so horny and stuff like that, representing Asian women like this, and you're wondering why
it's from an anti-war movie, a supposedly anti-war movie, Full Metal Jacket.
Right.
War.
Right.
And
so
even that in that context, they still caricature Asian women as a hypersexualized object, and it's like someone less than a human being. I mean, I just have to point that out.
Yeah, no, exactly. So he goes there to satisfy his requirements, if that's what we're all assuming happened. And then afterwards, when he's done with them, these are disposable people to him who he can dispose of in an attempt to battle his own demons. Like, I mean, that it doesn't get much more clear than that. I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts on that, about this idea that, oh no, it can't be racism related and stuff like that.
I think that's why they pushed the sex addiction angle, is because it fits the story of these. Not only because there's two with Asian women. There's two sorts of intersecting or overlapping stereotypes, right? One is that they're these sort of hypersexualized sex objects used for gratification of men. But the second is the sort of dragon lady stereotype, which is that they're also sort of disloyal and cunning. And with the, and we've seen this before, like when there was, this happened, if this was a minor story, but there was a woman from China who had found her way into Mar-a-Lago, and they had been accusing her of being basically I call it the spy. It's their spy whores, is basically this idea that these Chinese women are infiltrating, using their sexual allure, infiltrating the highest levels of government. This happened again with that the Chinese international student, and how they've been tying her with the Congressman Swalwell. That one.
Yeah.
And so there's that sort of the hypersexualized notion that she uses sex to get what she wants, but she's also a spy, right? And I think that with the sex addiction thing down in Atlanta, what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is push this idea that not only are they just these sex workers and sort of part of the general environment of vice and really not worth much, but they're also actively pushing a drug. They're sex pushers, right? And so it's this idea, if you can be addicted to sex, then the sex that they're supposedly allegedly selling is no different than the fentanyl or the other drugs that they've been trying to pin on Chinese. Right.
Oh, this is a long recurring pattern in U.S. history. I mean,
yes, yeah.
This dehumanization of Asian, and particular Asian women, that started with American imperialism in Asia. For over 100 years, American boys have been sent across the Pacific to brutalize the Asian population and particularly rape, harass, abuse Asian women. I mean, that example you brought up earlier about the film caricature of "Me Love You Long Time" from Full Metal Jacket. That was a background of Vietnam War. Whenever the U.S. military goes in East Asia, there's a huge sex industries sprung up to cater to them. This happened in Japan, in Korea, in Vietnam, and even in Thailand, where the soldiers American GIs from Vietnam War go for R&R. You know, that actually kicked off the sex tourism industry in Thailand, and the same thing in the Philippines. And so I think it makes the American public, and especially American men, to take the Asian women body for granted. This is, you know, and that again, it's been popularized in popular media in Hollywood, like the Full Metal Jacket movie, which is supposed to be an anti-war movie, right? And yet, what the American public take away from that is, oh, me love you long time. All these Asian women just horny for some American cock. You know, that's where we are. And I'm just ranting now.
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, I think the point that Teen made also is a really important one also, where they're basically subtly trying to turn these people into the drug dealers who are feeding this addiction. And I think that's probably why you had this effort to really humanize. I mean, look at this. I mean, this was you know, they went and they interviewed the grandparents of the killer also. CNN went to the grandparents and said, all I want to say is that he's our grandson and we still love him very much, said the grandmother. And then the grandfather didn't want to leave a comment. I mean, why are you doing that to begin with? What's the purpose of that? Why aren't you visiting the victim's family and getting any sort of, you know, responses from them? I don't know if you saw that.
This reminds me of these kind of liberal articles from before that decry American imperialism, but the angle they do it is, oh, because it's corrosive to the American character. It's the American imperialism. We go there to kill people. It's really bad because it brings something to our conscience, right? And it's doing something bad to us. It totally shifts the frame of victim here. It's like they're doing the same thing in this case. It's like they're saying, oh, because he is an evangelical Christian, you know, he went to this the Christian workshop that they're trying to suppress his sex addiction, but in the end he just couldn't take it anymore. He went to look for this massage partner because he thought those are the source of his temptation. It's always the victim blaming, right? And like you said, humanizing the aggressor. but whereas the victims are doing this too, is just kind of merely disposable objects.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely interesting to see how this plays out, and it almost, you know, everything else kind of, I feel like the what people are doing when they're standing out. I mean, it's great to see people standing out against this, but there's a superficial kind of nature to it, which I'll get into a little bit more. But onto the topic of, you know, while we're on the topic of Asian women and how they're seen, how they're viewed. Teen, you had an interesting experience where you changed your profile picture, and it gave you an interesting look into a different world that you weren't initially intending to do. This wasn't your purpose. So can you tell me a little bit about who you changed your profile picture to and what kind of experience you had when you did so?
Yeah. So obviously the Atlanta killings is has been a sort of capstone event to months or almost a year of escalating violence against Asian Americans. Not all of them very as well publicized. One of them was a young Hmong woman named Yi Lee, and she was killed in I believe Michigan in a very brutal fashion. We don't need to get into it.
She was gang rape and then kill, right? That's the case you're talking about.
Yeah. And reading that, I think I had there was a particular sense of, for me, horror at the brutality of the crime and the relative lack of interest in the media. It was nothing like what we see now with the Atlanta killings. And so there was a young artist who had been making these digital portraits of some of the victims, and including her. And I thought that was really nice that someone had done that. So if you noticed on Twitter, a lot of accounts have been using these sort of cell shaded portraits of some of the victims, like Vicha and E. And I used E because I thought that was someone who deserved a lot more attention. And I started realizing that a lot of people would reply to me and refer to me as she. They didn't know the meaning of the portrait, and so they assumed I was a woman, an Asian woman, because my handle says Asian American NPC. And I didn't really want to cry. Like, I didn't correct that every time. It wasn't really relevant. And I started just noticing that, like, I was getting more hostile interactions on Twitter. And a lot of times before, my profile pic was a male figure. It's usually not my own face, but some kind of male figure. But when it changed to a woman, and I guess particularly an Asian woman, I would get a lot of hostile replies, not just from men, by the way, also women, correcting me and telling me that I'm stupid, and just sort of like making, like, it was almost like playground taunts. Like, I would you've seen me on Twitter. Like, I can go into a whole, like, I can be, I try to make serious arguments on Twitter. Yeah, I'm not a shit poster. Yeah. And so I try to make actual sense on Twitter, I hope. And usually people will only reply if they like what I say. That I don't get a lot of, like, shit posts and trolling. But I was getting trolled left and right by people. They didn't even read the thread. They just came in to tell me how stupid I was. And I started realizing that this was because that they thought I was a woman. And so I kept it up just to see if this was a real thing, and I'm pretty convinced that it was. And I almost was encouraging people to maybe change their profile pic to an Asian woman and just see the difference in how you're treated online.
I must thank you for changing your profile, because I didn't aware of that particular case of that brutal crime until I see a whole bunch of mutuals I follow on Twitter switching to the same profile image. Then I did the research, and then I find out, and then I was shocked, why I did not know about this. Why did I find out about this on Twitter when I start noticing people changing their profile pictures, when this should have been, this very brutal crime should have been, there should have been a lot more awareness. And I think it goes back to why there's a lot of have been persistent violence against the Asian people in U.S. From all ethnicities, is because I think there's very little consequences, very little consequences for anti-Asian racism, both casual racism in everyday life, but also more serious, violent crimes. Because it almost seems like the Asians, because we don't make a big proportion. Maybe we're not great in numbers. It just don't matter. It just like the Asian Americans just don't seem to matter. And on top of that, I like to mention that people. There's an actual immediately after Atlanta shooting. A lot of those real suspects in the liberal media who had been pushing the xenophobia narrative, they're doing their best to disapprove that what they're done, whipping up the xenophobia, has anything to do with anti-Asian American violence inside United States. Right now, we're at the point where, people are not even, Chinese, right? They just look East Asian that get targeted. I just saw a recent case of a Sri Lankan man, just because his appearance is East Asian presenting, he was attacked. Well, his attacker was saying, I will get you, Asian fuckers. This is because this is United States. We know how the racial dynamic it works. If you look a certain way, if you look East Asian, then yeah, you're Chinese.
I think it's an important point too about how certain kinds of racism is swept under the rug. So, I mean, what we can do is we can get into some of the anti-China propaganda and how it ties into this, and how it's linked. But maybe we'll start from a base point about speaking about our own encounters with racism before all of this xenophobia kind of started, which gives you a good kind of base point to understand that this always did exist. And to your point, I mean, you're absolutely right. In school, if a kid, I grew up in pretty much an all-white town, And, you know, if a kid says something like, you know, uses the word packy as a derogatory term towards me, it doesn't really get that much attention. If they had said the N-word, then, you know, then there would have been a lot, you know, there's an understanding. But, you know, and also, you know, I had some friends who were from Laos, from different places, same kind of a thing. If they use the C word towards them, you know, or make the you know, the things, the teachers wouldn't really pay attention to it, but they were on higher alert about racism towards Black people, which they should be. I mean, that's good that was happening, but everybody else kind of got left out. It was like, you know, anybody who had these racist tendencies, they's like, all right, we can't do that anymore, but we've got this whole other group over here we can go and have some fun with.
Because,
yeah.
I think it's because, you know, the African Americans are a lot more vocal, and they have, you know, there's a whole history of civil rights struggle. And so what the mainstream do is they're like, okay, now we realize that's unacceptable. We can't touch that. But we still have this other groups, you know, we can freely practice our racism without consequences. So it's okay. And then when you point that out to them, they get very defensive. Then it's a defense. It's, oh, everybody's racist, you know, like, it's like, okay, how about you don't be one, you know? It's like, I'm just asking you not to practice that. Why you go to automatically go to everyone's racist defense? And to speak of personal experience, I mean, when I came to the United States when I was 13 in 1990. I used to take a bus, have to take a bus for an hour, you know, 3 bus transfers from Bridgeport in Chicago to more south side in Hyde Park to go to high school. One time I was just standing out in the cold, in the snow, waiting for my bus to arrive. And this a car full of white teenagers just drove by. They stopped in front of me. They spit me in the face, laughed at me, and then drove away. Right? I mean, that and yeah, I'm pretty sure that's racially motivated. And then there was a cases where I was so I was confronted by these 2 kids, one white, one Hispanic kid. They're just calling my name, calling me the C word, right? And I was really angry. I was about to respond, and then they pretend to pull a gun from their pocket. And I freaked out. I freaked out and ran because I went to Kingwood Academy in Southside Chicago. I actually witnessed one of my classmates getting shot in the schoolyard. So, you know, I don't, you know, if I think there's a gun, I just ran. But those are just like small incident, like everyday, you know, it's everyday incidents of people. I mean, I don't even, you know, like I remember people will call me Chinaman when I go to the Chicago Public Library. But you know, I sometimes I give people benefit of doubt. You know, maybe they don't realize Chinaman is considered derogatory, right? But it's those more physical confrontations that, you know, you can't really ignore it. It's in your face. You know, it not just happened to me, it also happened to my Chinese friend who came to US with me on the same plane. You know, there's a group of white kids always hanging around the neighborhood, and when he came visit me, he will get harassed. So for people that like us who grew up in the United States, we know that racism always exists. It has been always a problem.
Yeah. You know, I feel like you did exactly what you said earlier, that sometimes the Asian community kind of, you know, doesn't really speak up about it much. You did exactly that just now. You were like, maybe they don't realize that's a racist remark. Like, you have a lot more room. I mean, I think there's definitely probably, you know, African Americans who also sweep racism under the rug and they just quietly suffer with it. I think that happens. But as a group, I think you're right. I mean, even with me, I would always kind of same kind of thing, benefit of the doubt, or just kind of like, okay, it's not worth the fight. Maybe it's because we don't have the infrastructure there for people to pay attention to it and realize that it's wrong to begin with as well. But I mean, so I was in England until I was 5 years old. England, I think, was considerably more racist than Canada. My mother went through nursing school there, and the stories I hear, even going out after her night shift. And the bus driver saying wait, and then letting everybody else on the bus, and then closing the door before she can get on and driving. Somebody throwing a Coke can at her head while she was at a bus stop, and then my dad is white, and my mom is Indian descent or they're from she's from Guyana, so they come from somewhere in that region, before they were brought over as slaves. There was one time where she was in a flower shop and she was saying, okay, how much is that flower? How much is that flower? And after the third one, the guy blew up with her and said, get the F out of here. Why don't you F and go back where you came from? You pack here, whatever it is. And then she went home crying. And then my dad said, finally he had a location of somebody who abused her. And he went over there and drove over and then did the same thing. He's like, how much is that one? How much is that one? And he did it way longer. He did it like 10 times. And then the guy's like kind of feeling, okay, this is a bit weird. And then my dad blew up at him saying, why the F aren't you losing your temper with me? Why aren't you saying something like that to me? That was my wife. And the guy behind the counter says, hey, careful, I was in the army. And then my dad grabs him by the scruff of his clothes saying, I'm British Marines. And then he just, he didn't punch him or anything. He left, he got on his bike and left after that. He felt kind of, he felt probably some relief being able to finally confront someone, but also ashamed at the same time too, thinking that there must be a better way to deal with it. In Canada, it's a lot more passive. It's Canadians are friendly, and even their racism is very friendly. They're just such a lovely bunch that you just can't even be annoyed at them, even when they're being racist towards you.
Oh, you don't want these flowers. They're not really good. You don't.
Yeah. Maybe this is more suitable for you.
They're not the right ones.
Yeah. Maybe this neighborhood isn't so good for you. But there is definitely a pattern. When kids in school specifically want to pick a fight with you more than other people. I remember being one time in Leamington, Ontario. It's near Windsor, not too far from Detroit. It's the tomato capital of North America. They have a big Heinz factory there. And I was cutting through a gas station because there was a lot of traffic. I was cutting through a gas station to get to the other road, and there were other people doing it. I was the only car that was stopped. And this big white guy came out and started yelling at me and swearing and all this kind of stuff, while these other cars driven by white people are driving by. He never used a racist word, but I was like, I have a feeling this has something to do with the way I look, But again, I didn't really make too much noise about it. The only time I felt really uncomfortable, I started feeling a little bit more self-conscious, was after 9/11, when kind of people were suspicious of anybody with brown skin, traveling through the airports, getting selected for additional screening more, sir, can you take off your shoes, please? That kind of thing. I remember before it happened, I really wanted to, I had some white friends who were learning to fly like little Cessna, aircrafts, and I thought that's so cool. I want to learn to do that. I want to get my float licenses to be able to fly up to Muskoka and land on the river, the lakes and stuff like that. And after that, I just felt a little bit uncomfortable doing flight lessons. Have a brown guy showing up to a place to get flight lessons after 9/11. I'm sure I'm going to end up on some sort of a no-fly list after that.
Yeah. Actually, my coworker, right after 9/11, we were on an IT team working on the website of Cheap Tickets back when Cheap Tickets was based in Honolulu. He has been on the island for more than a month, and so he was really wanted to go home, go back to Chicago, and he went to the airport. The Cheap Tickets, because they're a travel company, they were able to get him a flight back. And then he got detained by the FBI at the airport. He's Indian American. He got detained for 3 hours for questioning, just because he's male, young, like early 20s. His last name is Shaw, and he was on a single one-way flight back to mainland U.S. He got questioned for 3 hours at the airport.
It's like that meme where they have the color swatch that goes from like white to brown, and they put it up against your face, and like where it's white, it's like mental illness, and as it goes down, it goes to jihadist. And the cop
Yeah,
puts it up against the guy like, where do you fall on this scale here?
You know, you're not as tanned as me, but I think you're right in the perfect color range to both get Asian hate and also brown hate.
Yeah, I'm in the sweet spot.
You're in the zone,
cool.
you know. So yeah. So actually, you know, and so what happened after that did manifest itself in a violent way. I mean, it seems like the violence towards the Asian community is worse than it was towards the brown community at that time. But a lot of things happened too. You know, a Sikh man who was mistaken as a Muslim was stabbed in a gas station. Mosques were being burnt down. Islamophobia was, you know, unbelievably high at that point. And so we'll get into obviously what's happened with this yellow peril kind of propaganda that's going on. But Tina, if you wanted to talk about a little bit of your experiences with racism in America.
My experience in America has been different. I grew up on the East Coast, mostly in Washington, D.C. and New York City area. And well, usually a very diverse place. There's always been other Asian people around me. So I honestly can say that I rarely encounter outright racial hostility. Partially it's because I'm a man too, and I speak native English. I was born here, and that does help. And I'm on the taller, bigger side. But my experience but the most intense experience of racism that I had really didn't have to do with me. It was in a social setting, and this is something that I learned is that the racism directed at Asian people is often it's hidden below the surface, meaning that you don't really see it until something happens that challenges a power structure or challenges a narrative, and then it comes out. Then you see it. So what happened was I was in college, and this was my final year. This is my senior year in college, and we have a student funded concert. It's a great party. It's a huge party. Everyone comes out, and that year we had a band called the Bloodhound Gang that was going to come and open for Outkast. Outkast was the main event. Oh, everyone loved to. I was there for Outkast. I was really excited, but Bloodhound Gang came on, and the Asian student body had protested. They were This is back in like 99, 2000. The Asian student body had protested the appearance of Bloodhound Gang because they had a song called Yellow Fever. And it was just sort of like what they called a sort of like lighthearted, lighthearted celebration of Asian women. But I can read you some lyrics. This is a very small selection. Because I ride my slant-eyed slope like a brand new Kawasaki. Oh, my chinky, she's so kinky, got me hot like Nagasaki. Burning up like napalm, bursting like an A-bomb. I think I got that jungle fever, but I caught it in Nam. So as you can see, it it makes light of the atom bomb. It's just everything, just every
napalm.
Yeah. It's intense, and so the student body had decided that when the university didn't do anything about this, and so the day of the concert, and the guys in the Bloodhound Gang had caught wind that there was a protest going on campus, and it was a pretty big protest. I mean, they were writing in the student newspaper. People were, shouting down faculty about this, and they didn't really do anything about it. And so the day of the concert came, and I confess I was not with the students that were protesting, and they were off on the side. I was there for Outkast. Now, I didn't like Bloodhound Gang. I didn't care, but I was like, I'll get through this. I just want to see Outkast, right? So when Bloodhound Gang came on, they performed the song. But before they did it, they told the crowd, because there was a line of Asian students standing to the side up on a hill, and they had their backs turned in protest to what was going on. They said and there were thousands of students. I mean, you talk like a big campus mall just filled with people. And the lead singer said, I want everyone in the crowd to turn over to these Asian students, give them the middle finger, and I want you to say, fuck you, ASU, which is the Asian Student Union, because that had been in the thing. The ASU was protesting them. And my university, University of Maryland, was the second university of two that had staged these protests, the other being Cal Berkeley. And so I was in the crowd, and I not expected this, where all of my peers just decided that it would be totally appropriate to literally tell these 10 or 15 students, fuck you, ASU. And then they performed the song. So that was shocked. Because like first, you know, when you see that many people turn onto a racist idea, it's very disorienting. It's quite frightening, actually. And so it wasn't directed at me. Yeah. And I did not experience any like personal hostility after that. And I suspect that for the most part, the people in the crowd didn't even know the fuck they were talking about. They probably didn't even know that this was a racial thing. But it left a impact on me, because I was like, you know, racism is not just something that's directed at me. It's something that is sort of like in the seeds of society that can be brought out rather easily, especially when it's with Asians, because people don't think that that's a taboo thing, right? People don't think that giving the middle finger to these Asian students, telling the Asian student unit to go fuck itself, is inappropriate and dangerous and wrong. And so that experience is informing kind of what I see now in terms of what I would say is the government acting kind of like the front man of the Bloodhound Gang to give permission to an audience to do something like this. It is like sort of a sort of social permissive atmosphere that allows this kind of thing to happen. So that was a very frightening event for me.
Oh, exactly. I mean, there's a general permissiveness in American society on any kind of anti-Asian racism, because I think all the political correctness drive in the last 30 years, what they have done is they taught the mainstream Americans, you know, you cannot say certain things aloud in public, right? But it didn't erase racism; it just drive it underground, and the Asian just happened to be the group that's is not supposed to be covered. You know, like we all know you're not supposed to talk about Black people, you know, or Hispanic people, but somehow everybody gives themselves a pass when it comes to Asians, and I think it's because there's very little consequences, and I think, you know, to talk about you know, a lot of the Asian attitude is because maybe, you know, the Asian people are not very vocal. Because I mean, for me, I came to U.S. as you know, as a teenager but my understanding is, you know, a lot of the first generation Asian immigrants to U.S. they're just trying to survive. They're just trying to you know, working hard at their job to provide better future for their children. That's a reason they keep their head down. You know, they don't want to get entangled in confrontations, but that kind of gives the impression to the general American public that Asian people are meek. You know, so there's no consequences to pick on them.
Carl, that's why my handle is the Asian American NPC. NPC as a non-player character. You know, it's the side characters in Grand Theft Auto that you can kill for sport, and there's no consequences to that because they're not really part of the game. That's why I call that's my handle, and I think you're right. That is the sort of general attitude. Asians, they're service providers. They do your nails. They cook your food. They do all the grunt work in the office while someone else takes credit for it, you know, stuff like that. They're not really seen as full participants. We're not seen as really full participants, even though we're visible, even though, we're relied upon. That's the NPC.
Yeah, we're being trotted out for model minorities, but anytime that we speak out against, say, racism against ourselves, we're very quickly shut down.
Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I want to touch on that topic where you said model minorities. There was a really interesting post I saw about that where there was an Asian American female who posted that this is a really, a dangerous thing to do also, where, they prop up successful Asians in America and talk about this model Asian minority while ignoring the people who are heavily disadvantaged, especially the ones who came over as refugees. And then it's also used against the African American community also, because it says, you see, there isn't racism in America, look, minorities can accomplish things. But it's actually taking a very specific group of people who were oftentimes already privileged when they came to the country. I don't know if you saw that post or what you think about that. If either of you saw that.
No, I mean that's definitely true. I haven't seen the post, but that's definitely true because a lot, especially I know the generation of I'm speaking particularly for the Chinese experience, the generation of the Chinese immigrants that came to United States after World War II, and after the communists took over mainland China, these group are very well educated, sometimes from the elite families. They came to U.S. They're already well set up for success. They just have to learn English and integrate better.
Right.
Whereas their whole group of Asians, including Chinese people, because there are a lot of. I went to school. I went to elementary school near Chicago Chinatown. Most of the kids, they came from rural Guangdong villages. They came to United States because their family members were the part of the Chinese railroad workers who came to United States in 19th century. So because they have some family ties. They came over. They're from rural Guangdong. Many of them didn't even speak Mandarin Chinese, and their parents really working like maybe the Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, right? And these people are just kind of get buried under the model minority myth, and we and you're exactly right. Model minority myth is using Asian to prop Asian, say why can you Black Americans also succeed, but that just bury all the problems that look at all these Asians. They don't talk up, right? They don't speak up. They just keep their heads down and
keep their heads down.
I think there's actually model minority myth is definitely employed here to do sort of racial arbitrage, for the sort of like white supremacist hierarchy. There's another thing that's at play, I think, and I don't know if you follow Yasha Levine on Twitter, but he calls it the weaponized immigrant.
Yes.
And I think that's actually something that's a little bit more relevant. I personally find that the model minority myth, I guess is what it's called, has somewhat outlived its usefulness because it's moved to a different stage where, and Asians are not by any means the only group that is subject to what he calls the weaponized immigrant. And I think for me, there's many examples of this, but a great example was, I don't know if you know the name Khizr Khan. Does that ring a bell? Khizr Khan came out in, I believe, the 2016 or 2015 Democratic National Convention. He's a Pakistani American. His son was killed in I believe it was killed in Iraq and in the war. And they brought Khizr Khan out to give a speech to declare that he was truly offended by some of the very anti-Muslim remarks that the Trump and the Trump administration had been making, and he very dramatically held up it was a very touching moment. He held up a constitution from his breast pocket and said, "I lost my son in the war. What do you know about sacrifice? You don't know anything. You don't know the first thing about sacrifice. I sacrificed everything." And it was a very touching moment. But if you stop to think about what was going on there, they were using him. The Democratic Party were using him to promote a woman who had voted for going to the war that ultimately killed his son, against a man who actually, and I'm not defending Trump in that sense, but I'm just saying that in this particular moment, Trump didn't have any. He wasn't in office. He didn't vote for any war. He was irrelevant to that. And so, if you think about how that's done, I think just the sort of dynamics behind how immigrants are used. There was another really famous case, before the first Iraq war, the sort of in Kuwait, where they had that young girl come out and sort of, make a lot of allegations about, awful human rights violations, awful atrocities that actually didn't take place. And I think that Asians are expected now to play that role. We're going to be. I'm looking forward a little bit in terms of what I expect to come down the road. That we are going to be asked to play the role of the weaponized immigrant, and that's going to be our ticket out of the sort of like racial oppression that's going to be coming our way. And I think that we're going to be particularly useful in a coming confrontation with China and with Asia generally.
That's already happening, Teen. I mean,
for sure.
There's a tweet
been happening for a while.
Yeah, there's a tweet which I tweeted out the screen cap. There's a Chinese American woman. She tweeted that we need to, as Asian Americans, we need to hold China responsible for COVID. We need to point out it is indeed a China virus. And then if you look at her profile, she actually, on her profile background image, it has all these U.S. Navy personnel standing on an aircraft carrier holding a giant flag of American flag. And on top of the image, it says, "America is not a racist country." Yeah. I just tweeted that out without further comments. Because
I mean, the Epoch Times crew, I mean, they're just straight. They've been. I was talking to Kaiser Kuo last night about this. He was saying like a lot of the Chinese American community that's sort of like Guo Wengui following, Epoch Times reading types have been full on denying that there's any such rise in racist attacks, and said that there's no way that the Atlanta murders were related to race. They're full on in denialism mode about.
Well, I want to say something about that, because a lot of these what we see in the full Trump, the first it's a lot of first generation, particularly first generation Chinese Americans who are going to the full Trump, full Epoch Times mode, and these people are usually almost majority are suburban, and they all middle class, right? And they also have very many of them actually not very well integrated. they hang out within their Chinese speaking circle. So yeah, of course they don't experience racism, because they don't even go out to talk to other non-Chinese Americans. They just stay in their own insular circle, and then they make this generalized comment about American society, which only exists in their head, or what's being fed to them by right-wing publications.
And these groups are responsible for posting some of the most nasty, extreme anti-China propaganda that's not founded in any sort of honesty. And you got to think, like, moving on kind of to the next subject about the anti-China propaganda. I want to say first, it of course is related. I mean, when you demonize a country like this, people are going to take out their frustrations or their vigilantism on a group of people who they think are associated with that. I remember when I was younger, I was listening to someone. He was a professor of Indian descent, born in India, but he came over to Canada when he was similar kind of an age, 5 years old. Speaks in a Canadian accent, and he's very much wants to empathize. I'm done. Yeah. Empathize. Well, he wants to really make a point of when I learn how to speak English again. He really wants to make a point about the fact that he's got this Canadian accent. He's very proud of it, and that's why he's offended when people ask where he's from, or they say, "Okay, well, where are you really from?" It's an ignorant question, but I don't like making too much of an issue about that. Sometimes people they honestly don't realize how that sounds. And I don't think there's any reason to jump on them for it prematurely, because then it prevents people from having future conversations with other people, people from different cultures, because they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. But halfway through his speech, he was talking about how how the reason, and this is where I think it really revealed why he didn't want to be asked where he was from. He says, the problem is India is associated with poverty and strife and stuff like that. And it was like, he kind of brushed over that. It wasn't a main point. I was like, you know what? I really think that's what it's about. He's ashamed of being associated with that because of the propaganda or whatever the popular image is of India, because unfortunately it does affect people who look Indian when people think this is what India is. If they're being told, they're not being told about the beauty of India, and they're just being told it's a dirty, poor country. This is absolutely going to affect them. So, yeah. You want to add something?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that applies to the Chinese Americans, to other East Asian Americans as well. This is something I totally recognize. I mean, like, I remember, I grew up, so I hang out with a lot of Taiwanese Americans when I was growing up. And because I can converse with them with Chinese, so I have a little bit more perspective on what they're thinking. And one of the things they emphasized, they wanted to be known as Taiwanese American as opposed to Chinese Americans, because they don't want to be associated with mainland China, because this was back in the 1990s, by the way, and because mainland China is this poor communist place, they don't want to be associated with all that bad things. They want, that's why they want to emphasize, no, we come from Taiwan. It's a different place from mainland China. We are part of the America's diplomatic allies. We're on your side, right? We're not those red Chinese. And
I think that's the bigger issue, Carl, is no longer the notion that China is a backwards, poor place. It's that China is an enemy, and it's dangerous you don't want that complication in your life,
in today's world, you're right. I'm speaking from my experience from back in 1990s when China was poor. and then a lot of
I say that because, like, my father spent his whole career, under a security clearance, and you had to be very careful about how because I'm not sure if you would have considered me Taiwanese, but like my parents went over to Taiwan right after the Chinese Civil War. And he worked at the CIA, and he had to be constantly surveilled and all this stuff. It was pretty intense, like this kind of surveillance that they do. And you remember, like, Wen Ho Lee, he was actually Taiwanese in a way that I'm not. Government prosecuted him anyway, and this was, I think, in the late 90s that happened, right?
Yeah.
So there's been a long history, and remember, China relations took a real dive, in the late 90s, right? It's been a long running thing that Chinese people are seen as potentially as potential spies.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that even in 1990s, Connie Chung said that.
Connie Chung, yes.
Yeah, she said she is a Chinese American, but she said on national television that all Chinese students in U.S. are all spies. Yeah. I was shocked, and because
that was a big deal when she said that. I remember my father was frightened because here he is. He's working with under top secret clearance at the CIA. And fucking Connie Chung comes on and be like, yo, there's Chinese spies everywhere. They've infiltrated. I'm very glad my father's retired, very retired. If I was a younger kid and my father was, in the middle of his career working in that position, I think, knowing what I know, I would be like, I really hope he just hangs it up and finds another line of work. I wouldn't want to be in that situation. He told me not to do it, by the way. He was like, I was in line to get my security clearance post 9/11. I was going to go work in intelligence. And my dad was like, yeah, don't do it.
About 10 years ago, like right around when the great financial crisis hit U.S., one of my friends who is Korean American, his mother is Korean, his father is Greek. So he used to joke to me. He's like, because he was applying for jobs at the time, and he was looking at all this defense in the defense sector because you requires clearance, right? Yeah. And used to joke to me. He's like, "Oh man, am I gonna get trouble for my association with you? You coming from communist China?" It was a big joke between us back then. But now it's shit. Shit is getting
You're
real.
flagged, bro. You're flagged.
Yeah. I mean, like back then, he will always point it out to me when we go. He's my surfing buddy, right? Like when we go surf, he will always say, "Oh yeah, he's a communist Chinese." We always make a big joke about that. But now it's not
so funny anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, seriously.
The China Initiative. It's real shit, man. You look.
Yeah.
Google
Yes.
it. Oh, viewers, Google the China Initiative, Department of Justice.
Yeah, when you look at this stuff and you see now, taking all of this stuff into context, the fact that there's undeniably somebody's going to feel their identity is tied to whatever is being said about the country of their heritage. And undeniably there was an underlying racism problem in America to begin with. So what do you think happens when we get this level of anti-China propaganda? I've got a few posters here where somebody, one of my Twitter friends, basically compared Nazi anti-Jewish propaganda to the Chinese propaganda that we're seeing now. And just comparing it side by side and showing how China is being villainized in the exact same sort of way. Obviously, a lot of this is hedged on the kind of fake propaganda about the abuses going on in China, which we won't really get into in too much detail here. I just finished a big session on that recently. But when you see stuff like this coming out, what do you think is going to happen? And then what do we got here also? We have now this tweet was deleted before, but let me show you this one here. I've got one tweet from, let's see here. This is, let me see if I've got it here. Okay, I'm going to find, oh yeah. So here we go. This is what this guy said. I don't think we need these categories. A liberal order building. China is a beast of a country and is acting accordingly. It would almost certainly act in this beastly manner, no matter its regime type. Norms and values aren't determinative, only expressive. Yeah. So, so much for the "I hate the Chinese government, not the Chinese people" argument. And this is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Surprise, surprise, a warmonger. So he's since deleted that, but it's like, what do you think is going to happen with this kind of anti-China propaganda?
I don't think people care. Look at Bethany Allen Ibrahim. I mean, she's married to an Iranian American. I didn't think of Armenian heritage, and she even said during the Trump era, she made a whole very loving, very moving thread about the impact on her family, on her Iranian American husband. But she also knew, she's a China watcher, right? She also say, now the Iranian and the Middle Easterns in United States, they're experiencing what these Chinese people say they face when the relationship worsened between the two governments. So she's well aware what the potential impact could be. But her whole job is being the grifter, writing all these anti-China propagandas for Axios. And she doesn't care. I think most of these people, they just don't care. Like Melissa Chan, right? She is Chinese American. But she actually said in a tweet, she said, this anti-Asian racism and anti-Asian violence in the United States is really bad because it gives cannon fodder to People's Republic's propaganda material. It's like,
that's her biggest worry.
You got your priority. Apparently, apparently the worst thing you can think about anti-Asian violence is that give China propaganda material against U.S., which is based on truth, by the way, and like Yeah,
Right.
these
Yeah. I mean, she knew the implications for her husband. I remember that really corny tweet she had before. I think it was before Trump was elected. She said she woke up from a dream, and in her dream, she was Trump was elected, and her long blonde hair covered her husband to protect him. It was like, whoa, that's a white knight in
we
shining
should
armor
just call
kind of.
her Rapunzel from now on.
Oh, it's unbelievable. They know the impact. And obviously, we're not going to get into the anti-China propaganda. It's unfortunate that people tie the two things together, because I've been kind of reflecting on this, and I was thinking, like, well, what would I do if I was in a situation, if all of a sudden Americans were being killed overseas? And I'm one of the things I talk about a lot is how evil the American empire is and stuff like that. I mean, I would start toning that down. I would start, it doesn't mean that, you don't have to stop talking about it, but you have to be really careful about how you frame this stuff, knowing the implications. Now, you have the added, yeah, go ahead.
For me, it's very obvious the two are linked, because whenever I talk about, whenever I start speaking about anti-Asian violence in the United States, people will jump into my timeline and under my comments say, but the Chinese government is legitimately horrible in human rights treatment. It's like, I'm talking about American issue. I mean, how hard is it to say, assaulting Asian grandma is wrong? What? This doesn't even have anything to do with China. Most of these people being assaulted has nothing to do with China. For the Sri Lankan man, the Hmong women, the Thai grandpa, these people are not even Chinese. They're getting assaulted in the United States because they look East Asian. And here you're trying to say, oh, Chinese government is doing all these horrible things. I mean, this is just proof that this is like, the two is so linked, and people just use it as an excuse. Whatever they think Chinese government is doing, that's just their excuse to express their own anti-Asian racism and make it normalize it.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to take this opportunity to plug the podcast that I did because I talked with Kaiser Kuo. I don't know if you know that name. I'm sure Carl does.
Yeah. I do.
And the funny thing, Carl, is I have a lot of the same disagreements with Kaiser as you do. And we had a podcast yesterday, which we'll post on Sunday. The podcast, our podcast is called Escape from Plan A. And kind of, if you're interested in this question, I would listen to the debate I had with him about it. We disagree a lot about a lot of things, about whether the Biden team is taking this seriously. He believes sincerely that they do have a team in place that is aware, cognizant of this. I would say that what the argument that you just gave, Carl, is a powerful one, and one that he agreed with and I agreed with, that now is the time to push that argument as forcefully as possible, not just to protect Asian American lives, but also to push back on the rank xenophobia and because I think about it, it's been very difficult to push back on that anti-Chinese propaganda to say, oh, that's unfair to China. Right? That's what you're saying is correct, is that their instinct is to respond to any pushback against that anti-Chinese propaganda with, yeah, but it's true, the Chinese are really bad, right? But what you're saying is, wait, I've shifted my concern to the safety of Asian American people, and they're not even Chinese Americans. So I think you can steal a march from them in the sense of saying, like, you're still just howling at some other thing in your head. I'm talking about like actual American lives. I'm talking about murders that are happening in America. And it's not just Chinese people or Chinese Americans that you can accuse of being puppets or spies or whatever that have divided loyalties. But you're talking about Sri Lankans. You're talking, exactly what you said.
But now in these people's head, they don't equate these people with Americans. They don't equate Asian Americans with Americans. That's why they say, oh, but China is doing all these things.
Well, no, I don't think that's exactly what's going on. I think what's going on is that they're still used to, they've become so what's the word? Not trained, but they've become so reflexive. Conditioned, yes. they've become so conditioned to respond to any pushback on the anti-China rhetoric with yes, but China is really bad. That's all they're doing. All they're doing is promoting and pushing anti-Chinese rhetoric. And people who have pushed back on it in the past, and I think the three of us have done plenty of that online, are accused of being sympathetic to China. And that's why you get all this, oh, I love the Chinese people or whatever. I just hate the government, right? Now we're talking about ethnic minority in America, most of whom aren't even Chinese, being killed, but they're still reflexively going to but China's really bad. So I think when that happens, Carl, and you catch them in that moment, what's going on is they don't really realize the point that you've just made. They haven't really connected the dots at how foolish and fucking foul they sound. And I think it's time for us to push on that and just calmly point it out when that happens. Like, you're literally saying that, that the concern that this kind of propaganda is affecting the safety and well-being of an ethnic minority in the United States, you don't care about that. You got to rethink, how committed you are to this kind of narrative and why, because it seems like you don't even care about American lives. So why should we trust you? I do think that with Kaiser, we reached a strong agreement that is not only an important thing to protect Asian American lives in America, but also to push against this rabid xenophobia that has overtaken both the right and the left. I think, and it's almost an opportunity in that sense that we could do that.
No, I agree. I want to just go back to something you said earlier about Kaiser believing Biden administration is doing something. So Biden did make a speech, right? He did make a speech. I appreciate it. He did go to Atlanta to visit the victim's family. That's a very nice gesture. But I'm old enough to remember George W. Bush making a speech about anti-Islamophobia in the United States. He this, right after 9/11, right? He went out and said, this is not about Islam. Islam is a religion of peace, and we need to treat all Americans with respect. Blah blah blah. Right? Guess what happened after that? After that, U.S. went into war in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Which made the Islamophobia even worse in the United States. I mean,
I would say that there was no. You're right. I mean, the force of Islamophobia and the connection to our foreign policy was clear, and we never fully overcame it. We still have not overcome it, but there has been, I think, a real movement in America to point that out. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying anything. I am saying that it is an available point of attack. That there is, it is not acceptable in polite American liberal discourse to dismiss Islamophobia as a real problem, which is not the case with xenophobia right now.
Not at all. Not at all. Right now, like even the so-called progressives, like Matt Stoller and Matt Ignatia of the so-called left, they're all saying the xenophobia is basically what can be used to unite the U.S. or unite the Americans.
Yeah, but why? Why do they say that? And the reason is because xenophobia thus far has been considered a victimless form of hate. Right. So if you say Islamophobia, now we understand, oh, there are people that have been killed. Oh, we now have the images of the atrocities from Abu Ghraib. And we can no longer claim that Islamophobia is a victimless form of hate. And that goes for anti-Semitism, of course. Right. You cannot claim that anti-Semitism is a victimless form of hate. With xenophobia, although it is there's many victims of xenophobia in the U.S. It's not the idea that there can be a victim of xenophobia has not really been popularized. It's not really been made clear to people, and a lot of people,
even today, a lot of people still don't take this anti-Asian racism seriously.
No, that's exactly. That's why this is an opportunity where the media has finally been forced to acknowledge that it exists, that Biden was forced to acknowledge it exists. And I think part of Biden's visit was, in fact, not just about, wokeness, but it was also about the fact that, it makes America look like shit on the international stage. And when it comes to diplomacy with China, it can be used against the U.S., right? And so I think that...
So you're saying use Melissa Chan's rhetoric and use it against her.
Yeah,
it is xenophobic. I mean, anti-Asian racism is bad in U.S. because it gives diplomatic weapons to China. So we should stop anti-Asian racism.
Yeah, no, I think that is actually would go into their calculation as to why that Biden can't dismiss, why he needs the federal government to actively pursue hate, look at this as a racially motivated thing, that they've got to take the wave of violence against Asians seriously and not dismiss it. They have to take it seriously. And as long as there's pressure to do that, as long as there is a victim identified within the mainstream media consciousness of America, and you make that link to say xenophobia has victims, these are their faces, these are their names, that is finally something to push back against xenophobia in America, whereas before there just wasn't any. And so I think that, in the sort of worst times when you have murders like this, you've got to see the opportunity that presents in terms of saying, like, okay, well, then those lives are not in vain. Those lives were not lost in vain. You can link that in a proper way to say you can no longer think of xenophobia as an innocent, victimless way to promote national unity in America. And I know that people are angry about this. I know that people are fucking jaded after decades of this shit, if not centuries of this shit. But people and especially Asian Americans, I know that you two don't live in America, but for when we talk to Asian Americans on our podcast or whatever, I'm in a mode now where I want to implore people to have the fighting spirit in them to do something about it. It's only the people alive right now that have the energy that can push back on it are going to push back on it. And it's not just for ourselves, but it is for a general anti-war, anti-confrontation, anti-escalation policy that could result in a fucking world war.
I agree.
So this is a point of activation for Asian Americans. They got to get off our asses and understand the critical moment in history that we find ourselves.
I'm in complete agreement with me. Right now I'm just angry and upset. I'm also angry and upset at those people who try to trivialize the issue, even among the freaking Asian American talking heads elite. You know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
These people saying, "Oh, the Asian Americans are just basically white adjacent." They are privileged people. I'm like, what? I came to this country as a poor immigrant, man. And then these stupid second generation diaspora who've been brought up in middle class, upper middle class background are now saying, the Asian, there's Asian American privilege. I'm like, sorry, I missed that.
Well, I as a second generation Asian American can confirm what you're saying about second generation. That is happening for sure. And I know also that a lot of second generation Asian Americans recognize it, but don't know what to do about it. And we've got to start nucleating narratives and organization and activities to say, fuck this shit. I'm not going to be a weaponized immigrant. I think that we need to take what Yasha Levine has said seriously, about this phenomenon. And this is a great opportunity to push back.
I went quiet there for a little while because I was looking for some clips to share that tie into this a little bit. It creates an unfortunate situation also where people want to push back against the anti-China propaganda that's going on, which a lot of it is so brainless. In the position of an Asian American, I would imagine that's like it seems like a different battle, but it's actually so tied together. But it would probably put you under so much more suspicion if you're like, you know what, guys? No, I don't think that's what's really going on in Hong Kong or Xinjiang. Or I think I don't think how the way these representatives are pushing this through is really representative of the truth. I mean, that must put you, the whole thing that you've got to fight this racism to begin with, which is tied to that, is an awkward kind of a catch-22. It's like, well, you can't speak up against this because then you're going to be attacked even more. Because the whole reason that you're being attacked is because they're upset with China. Now, if you're going to go and defend China, that's a whole nother level of targeting. I don't know how you feel. I'm going to share some clips with you in a second, but I don't know if you can talk about that a little bit.
The American racism, particularly anti-Asian racism, has always been tied together with American imperialism in Asia. That's why U.S. Mainstream U.S. has gotten to this idea that it's natural order of things. Okay, I'm just gonna come out and say it. It's tied with white supremacy, right? I mean, there's an idea that especially the white Americans, they're on the top of the hierarchy, and they anytime that kind of paradigm gets challenged, whether by Asians becoming more vocal within the United States, or by China actually rising and become more powerful, that threatens the paradigm of hegemony, and that gets pushed back, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I want to bring in some clips also. So on the 21st in Washington, D.C., there was a rally against it was Stop Asian Hate or something like that. The event was called. Then what happened was the American Uyghur Association, which is a group funded by the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, basically a cutout of the CIA. They're the guys who are funding the Xinjiang narrative, millions and millions of dollars, which immediately should get people's spidey senses going. Look at what they decided to do when, especially, so first of all, Asian hate crimes are on the rise. And second of all, people are so trying hard to the people who are supporting the anti-China rhetoric are trying so hard to say, well, no, don't conflate the two. Speaking out against China and anti-China racism are two unrelated topics. Well, look, I'm going to play a short video here for you, what the American Uyghur Association did to disrupt the protests in Washington, D.C. on the 21st. I'll play that clip for you now.
Stop the genocide! No concentration camps!
So, yes, that's what they decided to do during an anti-Asian hate crime protest. And so this is an NED state sponsored group that organized this. They went in afterwards and they said, oh, well, it was just a coincidence. We planned this from a month ago. It was an event for the, let me see if I've got that.
Nowruz. Yeah, they're planning to celebrate Nowruz, which falls on that day. And they claim that they're doing that because the Nowruz celebration is banned in Xinjiang, which is totally not true.
You gotta wonder, though, like how stupid that is, because the optics of that are just terrible. See, I think that's a perfect example of how having an identifiable victim of this stuff, in terms of innocent Asian Americans, elderly, women, gunned down.
You know what? To respond to that, I mean, that event, that clip actually broke a lot of liberal brains, because I've seen many people quote tweeting it, and they're saying, "Oh my God, why are they so stupid?" By they mean the both sides. They're saying, "Oh, you can be anti-China's authoritarian government and be against the anti-Asian racism at the same time in the United States." There's a lot of liberals saying shit like that, and for them, they're still in denial. All these anti-China rhetoric is having a direct impact, on the anti-Asian racism in the US.
I want to finish that point too by saying I actually tried to look up, and the earliest evidence of that particular website on the internet was, I'm not sure if that picture is coming up. Do you see a picture coming up on your screen?
Yeah.
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 So the earliest evidence of it was that page was created was after the event. So it looks like it was damage control that they were doing. The first time that it showed up on the internet was the 22nd. I couldn't find anything else. A little bit of a side note. This is just I don't want to go into this because this is going to get too heavy. But one of the cars, I looked at the license plate, and it is owned by an executive at the National Petroleum Council. Is the image showing up on the screen for you? I'm not sure of it. Yeah. Okay, it's not showing up on my side, but yeah. Which is a massive lobby group that's taken a special interest in the happenings of the oil industry in East Asia, and the way that China is disrupting Western oil companies in Kazakhstan and the region, both by loans and also oil infrastructure. So there's something a little bit crazy going on there. There's a lot of connections to those groups, but I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. It's imperialist propaganda, which is affecting people. Now, what I want to do is to go a little bit deeper into people who are trying to not conflate anti-China propaganda with the rise in anti-Asian kind of racism. I'm not sure if you saw the clip from a guy named Chip Roy when he was talking about a noose, like he's from the South too. He's talking about getting the longest piece of rope and finding the tallest tree, and then talking about how China's the most evil entity. This had nothing to do with China. This was a conference. This was a panel about anti-Asian racism, and then he all of a sudden decides to bring this up. So I'm going to play that for you now to see you can see firsthand what you said during an event which was supposed to be addressing Asian racism.
There's old sayings in Texas about, find all the rope in Texas and get a tall oak tree. So now we're talking about whether talking about China, the Chi-Coms, the Chinese Communist Party, whatever phrasing we want to use, and if some people are saying, hey, we think those guys are the bad guys, for whatever reason. And let me just say clearly, I do. I think the Chinese Communist Party running the country of China, I think they're the bad guys. And I think that they are harming people.
So, like talk about conflating the two. And then, Chi-Coms, like what the hell, what is going on? Find the longest rope you can find in the tallest tree. Like, Jesus. No, so, but what I want to do is I want to play a very heartfelt response by Representative Grace Meng. These are two clips that I got from Democracy Now! It's a video that I saw this morning, which really spoke about the whole issue of this American imperialist propaganda and its direct impact on Asian Americans, regardless if you're Chinese or not. But here is Grace's response.
Your president and your party and your colleagues can talk about issues with any other country that you want. But you don't have to do it by putting a bullseye on the back of Asian Americans across this country, on our grandparents, on our kids. This hearing was to address the hurt and pain of our community and to find solutions, and we will not let you take our voice away from us.
That was
right. So you can imagine how if that was that was the talking point during a meeting like that, when obviously the two things are connected, the anti-China racism or anti-China propaganda and Asian racism, you can imagine how hurt somebody was like that is now going out in public worrying for their safety. I don't know if you saw those videos and what your thoughts are on those events.
I did see that. Grace Meng is my House representative. And I'd say that, one, I was very touched that she had said that, and I thought that Chip Roy was obviously a racist prick. What I would say though is that I can't imagine a more effective exposure of this of what xenophobia really is like than these kinds of outbursts at those kinds of times. It's the same thing with that with the genocide caravan, to the Stop Asian Hate rally. I don't know why these people want to make the connection, because maybe they don't understand what they're doing to their own narrative, which is destroying it. And they had a narrative that didn't need could have avoided this, and they could have made this worse, much more scary. But they're so fucking racist that they can't help but take the bait every time they have a chance to shove it in an Asian American's face because it is fundamentally motivated by racism. And that's why racism is a weakness. It's not a strength. It's a fucking weakness. It tempts people into doing non-strategic mistakes that are going to cost them, their plans to dominate the world or be whatever. They're fucking idiots because of the racism. They can't control themselves. So I think they made major mistakes. I think they've exposed themselves for what they really are. Chip Roy has done great favors to people who want to oppose this cancer that's wanting to grow inside the American politics. I'm glad this got outed.
Yeah. It's amazing how across the board, also with these so-called human rights groups, also I agree with your point on that, and going back to the kind of the American Uyghur Association group that came out. Because did you guys see that video of Maura Moynihan? I don't know if I said it. She is the let me play the clip.
Yeah,
that's, hold on, I'll show you a bit.
You're ashamed. It is the ugly racist rant in a New York City cab that went viral. Say that racist again. He's like communist China?
Well, isn't that where you're from?
The question so many have been asking, though, where is she from and who is she? It turns out she lives right here near where...
Okay, I'll stop the video there. But this is somebody who is a free Tibet activist. She's met personally with the Dalai Lama, and her hate for China.
To the Epoch Times.
Yes, under it was a pet name, wasn't it? Wasn't it?
Baby.
Yeah. So one of the most.
She's a daughter of late Senator Patrick Moynihan, like a very famous U.S. politician. I mean, she actually, somebody looked her up. She actually testified before Congress with Gordon Chan about China human rights issue.
Also, Patrick Moynihan, despite he's a liberal lion and he's a legend, but he's also known as sort of the face of liberal racism for his Moynihan report on Black Americans. So there's a thread there.
Yeah, and it's so for her, who opposes the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party, and is probably also one of these people who try to say that, oh no, the two things aren't conflated, is now on a racist tirade against Asian Americans who were not even born in China, who were born in America. Like all of a sudden, it's like like you said, they're destroying their own, fake little narrative or script here. Across the board, we're seeing the same thing. There was. I want to get into. Let me see here. We had.
And I just want to keep that on her. She actually issued a statement. She said, I'm not racist. I'm always a friend of Asians and Asian American. As a matter of fact, I have supported the Tibetan people in their struggle against the Chinese Communist government. She used it as her defense. And in the ABC report about the incident, she initially accosted the wife of the husband who was on the video, because the wife, who by the last name looks like she's a Korean American because her last name is Ha, and she was just she was accosted, confronted by Maura Moynihan, unprovoked. That's in the ABC report. She was just standing on the street, and then Maura Moynihan started looking at her funny, and then tell her to go back to China. That's what touched off that video. Just little more context.
It's another example of them giving away, and this from a liberal, giving away the connection between street level racism and this pervasive yellow peril. It's a combination. It's like ketchup and mustard. It's a little yellow peril. It's a little red scare. And right.
Yeah.
And it's pervasive.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the video too of the guy. There was a Filipino guy recording himself on the subway, and he was being berated by another guy who was talking about, oh, you're supposed to be Buddhist. Why are you locking up the Muslims? And just yelling at this guy. He's not even from China. He's Filipino. And it's like, this is what we've been saying all along, that the two things are connected. I think, like you said, there's a bunch of stuff going on right now that's really revealing, from the American Uyghur Association, from Chip Roy's comments, and from this Maura lady. who went off on these
at
Asian
bottom
records.
line, American society is not healthy. It has a lot of unprocessed racial history and tensions and animus that cannot be processed in a real way, in a proper way. We still cannot properly talk about something like slavery reparations, which is so overdue. It's ridiculous. We can't
but now
talk
they want
about
reparation from China for COVID.
exactly. See, that's exactly a great example is how we sublimate the kinds of racial I don't even know what to call it at this point, but some sort of racial reckoning or some sort of, true internal reflection and confrontation about our own history, without finding excuses, without avoiding the topic, and above all, without sublimating those things onto a form of hatred which is seen to be victimless. And this can't continue forever because eventually, and we're seeing how quickly in America, if you get attention, if you force people to pay attention, and Asian Americans, in my opinion, have done a fantastic job not running away from this, not reminding everyone that they're not Chinese, not saying, "Hey, go find the Chinese immigrants." We haven't done that, and I'm proud of Asian Americans for doing that because we've learned our lessons from history. And pretty soon, this will not be xenophobia and anti-Asian hate will not be seen as an innocent, acceptable form of casual racism, which it has been for decades. My whole life, it's been like that. But the story I told you was exactly what that is. It's a casual form of acceptable racism. It won't be long for that anymore.
And it was totally normalizing, like it totally woven the thread of American imperialism and anti-Asian racism together, because the song lyrics you talk about dropping the atom bombs, you're talking about dropping the napalm bomb in Vietnam. It's all these violence that U.S. is inflicted upon Asian countries, and somehow that's wrapped up with a fetish for Asian women.
Yes, and because in the sickest twist of all of this is the deeply, and this is fading. Well, this is coming back, and this is something that we got to watch for. That the white supremacist mindset, it believes that it has been victimized by Asians. It believes that we were the victims of the Vietnam War. It believes that we were the victims of World War II. That we saved Asia from itself. And that now, we've been victimized by Japan in the 80s and with the economic dominance. And now the Chinese are victimizing us. They raped our country. They stole our wealth. And now they killed 600,000 Americans with their man-made bioweapon. So
I just like to remind everyone that Yellow Peril narrative started in the United States right around the Boxer Rebellion, when U.S. Marines were sent over to occupy Beijing and sack the Forbidden City. It's under this kind of circumstances that Yellow Peril narrative are being whipped up in the United States to fear about a potential Asian invasion. I mean, there's a lot psychologists will have a lot to say about that. It's kind of the guilty conscience about what U.S. is actually doing to the Asian people. And there's a fear of they might one day take revenge upon us for the shit that we have done. And that's exactly what's going on right now.
It is, but Carl, I think also it is a function of the fact that the West never did fully colonize China, and that China and Chinese people represent a sort of frustration of American empire at the same time. And Boxer Rebellion is both an example for and against that. And in a way, I think that the acceptability of anti-Asian racism being tied to feelings about China, I think is something that enrages a lot of Asian people as somehow hypocritical or unfair. But I think it's also rooted in the fact in history that China never was fully colonized, and that and about the loss of China after World War II, and that the way that the government that we wanted to take over didn't got booted out, and that China does represent, I think, to sort of like the national psyche of Americans as a kind of frustration. And that frustration allows keeps the project incomplete. And so that's why I think anti-Asian racism and xenophobia remain acceptable. And so to me, I think that we have to close the door on that. And whenever there's an opportunity to close the door like there is now, we got to do it. And we can no longer allow these people to go on Twitter and pretend like xenophobia is a victimless transgression. That it's not somehow different than being anti-Semitic, that it's somehow different than being anti-Black, that it's different than being Islamophobic. It's not. It has victims. There's a really important point.
Yeah, there's a real extreme between the groups that America is truly concerned about protecting and the groups that are not. I mean, I don't know if you remember, when a lot of Chinese people who were proud of China, it was more during the Hong Kong protest period of time. A lot of them were being removed from Twitter for being Chinese bots, just because they were saying too many positive things about China. They're like, no, these people can't be real. And so there was a strategy where people started putting that they were LGBTQ in their profile, in their Twitter profile, and then they became protected. Then they wouldn't be removed, because then it would be, Twitter's removing somebody from the LGBTQ community. That's a big no-no. And you see, if you don't mind, I want to play a few videos from some smaller YouTubers who I've spoken about quite a bit on my Twitter, even though it may make you lose your appetite. But I want to show you what things people are allowed to get away with speaking about China and the Chinese community, and kind of dehumanizing them while this is all going on. And these are coming from some people who always say, I don't hate the Chinese people, I hate the Chinese government, or I really care for the Chinese people. Well, so the first guy I'm going to play for you, he's a guy called Serpent ZA, and he's not a small YouTuber. He's got like 700,000 subscribers. Not everybody might know him, but I'll show you some of the stuff that he felt was appropriate to speak about during the rise of Asian attacks. Let me go with this first one.
China really doesn't have a very long history, and even this claim of 5,000 years of history has been debunked through other means too. So anyway, there's no proof of that. It's a bunch of nonsense. And certainly if you had 5,000 years of history, you wouldn't be spitting on the street and defecating on the street and stuff like that, because that's not what a civilization does.
So, I mean, that's just one of the more mild things. He was saying stuff like, when he found a video of one guy who wasn't wearing a mask, and he said, and this was before the pandemic really hit the US, he said, you see Chinese people, they don't wear masks because they have no sense of compassion. They're an uncompassionate, they're a non-normal society and stuff like that. Well, look at America now with the mask situation. But then
crazy.
Yeah, it's like, why are you doing this? What is this, especially during now? And this, I want to show you something else he said, where he thought it was a good idea to show pictures of dirty toilets during the time when a hashtag on Twitter was trending, Asians are humans. Like, I don't know if that's this good thing or that's something to be sad of, that people need to be reminded that Asians are humans. And here's what he decided to do. And he doesn't live in China anymore, so he's pulling up all of this old footage to paint this picture while Asians are being beat up in the street. I'll let you listen to this one too.
But it's more about the state, really, of a lot of these public bathrooms. And I think you can tell a lot about a society by the toilets. I know that sounds weird, but this really gives you a no-nonsense look at Chinese society, because public toilets are the great equalizer.
Why? Like, what's the purpose of that? I just finished. There was something interesting that I picked up on Teen that you said also, is when something along the lines of when the power structures change, that's when it really becomes a problem. Because this guy, I mean, he spoke about, when he was in China, he spoke about the positives and the negatives in a more neutral way. But now he's speaking in a much more aggressive way, like, during a time when anti-Asian attacks are increasing oddly too. But he wouldn't report on toilets quite that way back then. But what's happened now is the situation has improved. I've been to multiple villages over the last couple months. Even the villages, they've knocked down their outhouses. They've put modern toilets in, even in the middle of nowhere, Anhui. I did 5,000 kilometers on the highway, stopping in service stations along the way. And, the toilets were absolutely everything is improving very quickly. The toilets were amazing. In my wife's village of Jiangxi, middle of nowhere, they've got a public toilet area in this nowhere little village. And when I was camping out there in our RV, I would actually go to the public toilet rather than use the one in my RV because it was so nice. And it's like, I think he knows that, but he's got to dig through these archives to try to paint this picture because of the reason that China's improving. And all of a sudden it didn't stay down there where it belonged. It does seem like a lot of people are threatened by it. So I have a feeling that some people truly know what they're doing, but it's coming out of a place where they feel threatened and displaced.
And in the case of Serpanza, I think it's very obvious because he has realized more recently that he can make a lot more money to appeal, to cater to all these anti-China sentiment, right? I mean, like him and his buddy went on to the China Uncensored podcast, which is sponsored by the cult Falun Gong. Like I mean, this is like they you know what? Because right now there's a lot more money, coming from
yeah.
That's why he's doing it.
That was an interesting one because I remember he ripped into a few YouTubers here in China who went on a trip with CRI. It's a state-owned news company here, and they took them on a trip to Xi'an and they visited. And basically, he drawed the conclusion with the fact that these guys are associating with CRI says a lot about them and all this kind of stuff. But he's going on Falun Gong news outlets, a religion that literally says that mixed race children are a plot from the aliens to divide the human society when he himself has a mixed child. It's quite unbelievable, and it goes. So I want to. There's another guy.
He's one of those white guy with Asian wives defense. Like, I married a Chinese woman, so
and he uses it. Yeah. It's like one of those, like, I have a black friend, and not realizing that the whole thing of him, finding an Asian wife potentially ties into this problematic thing that we've been talking about.
Carl, he sounds more like a guy that has an Chinese ex-wife who fucking hates him. That's what.
Seriously. Yeah, no. I mean, I don't know what's going on there. It's obviously quite toxic, and I think he knows what he's doing. Like you said, it plays into the xenophobia and all this stuff. It's a massive bandwagon right now. Why wouldn't you jump onto that if growth and attention is?
Are you going to play another video of his or what?
I was going to play one of a guy that he promotes, which was something. This is a really odd one too, and I think it shows the hypocrisy here. So this is a smaller YouTuber called Prime in China, and I want to play you a video that he put out less than 24 hours before the shooter went through those Asian spas and killed those women. I'll play that for you now.
The whole Asians aren't safe in America thing is hilarious at best. Hilarious. Let's forget Tiananmen Square massacre. Let's forget the deaths along the border with India. Let's forget the issues with Tibet.
So it sounded like the first bit was cut off there, but he said Asian Americans aren't safe in America. The idea of that is hilarious. Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't come through on my side. And then again, the end of the video, he's talking about, well, look at all these human rights abuses. Again, showing all their cards that no, they do want to associate these things, that these things are related. I just want to finish with something that the ironic thing is that this guy. This guy is he's convicted of animal abuse. He killed two of his dogs. They got to a point where the corpses were rotting, and then the neighbor had to call the police. They came in, so he got arrested, and he was given this is all information available online. You can check the police records, and he got off on community service. He had to do community service at an animal shelter, but he decided not to do it. He decided to fly over to Guangzhou and live in China for a while, find a Chinese wife, and then go back. But now he's back, and he's in a state outside of the jurisdiction of that. So he's got an open arrest warrant on him. But the funny thing is that this Serpentier guy, he did tons of videos on animal abuse in China and how poorly animals are treated in China. And the common theme you'll also see is that when they talk about the Yulin Dog Festival and things like that, they'll never talk about the Chinese people who are against it, who are literally on the highways blocking trucks and protesting this. They want to put themselves forward as these, white saviors coming in to save the day. They know what's best for China. They need people like him. They need white people like him to help the Chinese people. But meanwhile, he's promoting this guy. The guy I just showed you, the dog killer, he's promoted him multiple times on his channel and links to him saying this guy knows what's going on. So I confronted him on Twitter about it. And I said, well, why, if you're so concerned about animal abuse, are you, promoting this guy? And he's, going back. He didn't really have a good answer to it. I said, no, I understand completely. It's like, you care so much about the animals, but when you're finally face to face with an actual animal abuser, you're not doing anything about it. And it might just be a coincidence that he's a white American saying the things that you like about China. It's really remarkable what's going on. I don't know if you've got anything.
I think that I think the fact that he's an abuser is really important here, because the way I view these, because this is a pattern, right? Carl, you've mentioned how this has a lot to do with a sort of a need to reaffirm the racial superiority of white. Now in America, this is familiar. This is not unique to Asians. This is a thing that white supremacy imposes on all, quote, subordinate races. And there's a famous book called The Wages of Whiteness, which shows how this was used in America, where the underclass whites were sort of given a certain wage or a white dividend to say, you may be exploited, you may not be you may not be equal members of society with us landed folks, but you're going to be better than the black slaves, or you're going to be better than that, right? So it is sort of almost like a racial petty bourgeois. And you see this with a lot of expats, and it's not just in China. I think in China it gets a little bit more exposed than other places because it's so ridiculous. But I mean, this happens a lot in a lot of underdeveloped parts of the world. It happens all over Africa, like really terrible shit. It happens all over Southeast Asia. It happens all over Latin America, where predominantly white men, not only white men, predominantly white men who need to exercise that wage of whiteness, who in America, and this is a known stereotype among white Americans, that it's the sort of loser sexpat that can't make it in America that goes and uses his whiteness and achieves redeems the dividend of that whiteness in a foreign country, and he expects that when he arrives at that foreign country, that he will become the superior white man that in a way the culture of America has communicated to him he deserves. And so when that happens, I think, and what I've been told by people who understand this a little better than I do, is that in certain countries, that expectation gets extremely frustrated. That their expectations of how they'll be treated does not match with the reality, and that creates a deep sense of bitterness. And that happens, for example, in America, when people feel that they are owed a certain amount of respect just because they're white, but they're not given that respect. That engenders a really vicious form of racism and anti-black racism. And I think when people go to China and they suddenly realize, like, oh, China doesn't give a fuck about you. You're like, no, just because you're some white American doesn't mean shit in this country, and it's just you're just as nothing here as you are back home. That creates a very, very bitter sense of aggrievement. And I think these kinds of videos are, I almost see them as a way that a man who's spurned by a woman would go and spread filthy lies about her, say she's dirty, say she's poor. The people who do stuff like revenge porn, where they go online and spill all the secrets of an ex-girlfriend who dumped them, and start saying like, oh, she's fucking crazy, here's what she did to me, oh, she's a slut, she's dirty, look at her here's, I got a picture of her bathroom, there's like shit like that. That's what this is. So it's disgusting.
Yeah, well, it's a classic case because even before he became openly xenophobe, he used to say shit about his old home in South Africa. He would say shit like, oh, South Africa was running great until the end of apartheid, and then all these black folks are gaining money and power, which they didn't work for.
Yeah,
which, we white folks were rich in South Africa because we put in the hard work. But look at all these black folks suddenly driving expensive cars. They didn't earn for that. That's why I left South Africa, go to China, because I couldn't deal with this nonsense. Well, my first,
This is how they were taught.
Yeah. And so now, it's unbelievable. Yeah, he like somebody keeps saying that he used to call the apartheid a delicious cake, And actually, I've got a video. Let's share the video where he's talking about that. He's talking about the apartheid because now this guy has moved over to America and he's got a lot of American followers. Like I said, 700,000 viewers, 700,000 subscribers, and they're like, some of them might actually believe, oh, no, this guy isn't a racist. This guy's just, he's concerned about what's going on in China. He's concerned about the animals. Yeah, sure, he's got a best buddy who killed his dogs that he's promoting. But no, you know what? I'm going to play that for you now, the apartheid video.
Before the ANC took over, you had a situation where the majority of the wealth was kind of in the hands of old families that have been, there for a very long time.
Sure.
So, obviously, white people that had been part of the settlers from hundreds of years had built up all these big businesses and so on.
Sure.
When the ANC took over, of course, a lot of nepotism was involved.
Sure.
So suddenly people that did not have a driver's license, for instance, would get a brand new, I remember the BMW X5 was the newest thing back then. Okay, and it was the one to have.
Right.
And when you grow up, you're used to seeing the kind of person who has the money to buy a big BMW or something is somebody who's, kind of earned it over a long period of time. So it's somebody who's worked really hard and eventually they can afford this BMW. Or it comes from, like I said, a long history of money in the family. So like rich kids would be able to get this. But all of a sudden, this new wealth just popped out of nowhere because it's all through, the government connections and the nepotism and the tenderpreneurship and all that stuff that happened in South Africa.
Sure.
So what you found, it was really bizarre, is overnight you saw an influx of luxury cars on the road. And I mean,
Sure.
they just exploded everywhere.
Right.
And like I said, it was people that previously didn't even have a driver's license. In fact, they still didn't. They would buy them. And so you'd find like all these trashed BMWs. You'd see a brand new X5 with a massive dent in it because, hey, they've just got their car and they've just learned how to drive and they're crashing into
literally the
gates.
same as China.
Yeah, I know. So that's why I said we could draw so many parallels.
Sure.
So when you've got this new money and you don't know what to do with it, you go out and you get what you think you need.
Yeah.
Flashy car,
Sure.
flashy watch,
Sure.
flashy clothes, stupid lavish house or apartment, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas people that have built money over time, I think they're a little bit more reasonable on what they spend on.
Sure.
They plan things out more because they know how difficult it was to make that money, and they're obviously
Sure.
good with money, and that's how they ended up where they were.
There's
Daniel, you shared that video before.
I have on Twitter, so there's so much to unpack on that. I mean, and there's something I want to be clear about. Those pictures of Black South Africans, I didn't put those on top of the video. He did it. So when he talks about white, and he doesn't want to say black directly, but he's putting photos of black people up. Understand, he's saying black people. Black people now have money because of corruption, not because there's no longer an apartheid, not because we're no longer oppressing them. And we built up money over time. We, the people who have been there for a long time, white people, have been in Africa for a long time, built it up over time. And it had nothing to do with the apartheid when we had this unfair advantage over black people. But there's something interesting going on there too. It's this hatred that's coming out when all of a sudden black people are doing as well as white people. He's got to degrade it sometime. He's got to marginalize it somehow. And you kind of, it just made me think now, you see the same kind of thing going on with him criticizing China. All of a sudden, China is a rising power. Now he's got a really big problem with China. And it ties into so much of the other stuff we're talking about here. But if you wanted to say something on it as well. Oh, are you muted?
Oh,
Yeah.
me? No, I just wanted to say he's kind of the summation of all we have been talking about in this podcast. It's about this. He in his mind, which I'm glad he speak out the quiet part loud, right? The white settler colonialism. No, that is good. But the other people, the non-white people having BMWs, oh my God, they're not learning their place.
Travesty, yeah. And I think what Tim was saying also was when you learn you're just not as special as you thought you were. There's a I think we lost him. Let's wait until he he might have to log back in.
He
But
said-
oh, okay. Yeah. So maybe his audio has a problem. That's why he wasn't speaking just now. But the one thing is in China, when foreigners came over to China, they used to be, and they still are, but not like before. They used to be treated like absolute royalty. It's like, oh, my foreign friend or something like that. Now we're not so special here anymore. I think teens. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So now we're not as special anymore. And you hear that as a theme in his video as well. Like before we could do anything we wanted. I could fly my drone wherever I wanted. He could basically do whatever he wanted. He didn't have any rules he had to follow, and he could get away with white privilege. And now, over the last few years, that's something that's being lost. People are still treated with great respect here. Outsiders are treated with great respect, but it's not like people are going so far out of their way to accommodate foreigners in China anymore. And I think it's the same thing that Team was talking about. All of a sudden, it's like, oh shoot, I'm supposed to be better than these people. What's happening here? Now the guns are coming out.
I am always flabbergasted by these white expats who come from white colonial settler societies who came to China, who where most people are very welcoming to foreigners, but yet when these white expats decry racism against white people in China, that always gets me. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
That's the new thing. That's the new thing they're going on, is they're saying, oh, it's, where the Chinese people are racist towards us. And actually, I have got a little clip from somebody that's very short clip that's very interesting. There's this guy, he created a t-shirt brand like Ching Chong Bing Long or something like that. Like this, he wanted to make it like a stereotypical Chinese word. And he had a guy in the background speaking in a really stereotypical Chinese accent, over-exaggerated caricature. And he wants to sell these t-shirts like, stop the CCP and the China virus, like China virus t-shirts and stuff like that. And at the end, he's saying it's about anti-racism because China is racist. They're racist towards black people. But what really got me, what was really interesting, was at the end of the video, he wanted to speak directly to white supremacists. He wanted to speak to them and said, you should support this too. And like he wants white racists, people who are racist towards black people, to wear his product. And I'll let you listen to it. Hold on.
P.S. Even if you are some kind of like hillbilly racist who hates black people, you should also support this cause, because these Chinese companies are literally paying white people the absolute minimum possible to keep them from quitting. I would know as somebody who's worked in their HR department.
Like hold on a second. This is an anti-racism initiative apparently, and you want KKK members to wear your t-shirt, and it really sounds like it's like, and it's because how dare China does capitalism like America does, paying us the bare minimum to stay in a job. Oh my God, it's not like I can go off and find anything better. But it's like it seems like he's gotten to a point where he's like, whoa, hold on a second. If anybody's going to do racism here, it's us. Maybe he really thinks there are some Chinese racists that he encountered, and it just shocked his whole understanding of not only that he's supposed to be better than them, but that if anybody's going to the KKK on his side to support his anti-racism initiative because it's against Chinese racists. It's like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I think that when you're quote at the top of the heap, the problem with being the top dog is that once anyone topples you, your status is now you've been exposed to everyone. And I think with white supremacists, the danger of even like one specific ethnicity of people, not even Asians, but like this specific type of, this specific nationality of Asians showing you up and saying, yeah, no, we don't recognize your racial superiority. In fact, we will. And you saw you've seen China becoming in their diplomacy, becoming a little bit more, actually a lot more outspoken in terms of talking about American white supremacy. The idea that one group will show you up on it and topple that conception is dangerous to the entire structure. I think that's why there's so much focus on China right now. I don't actually think that white supremacists hold a lot of hate like for China versus other parts of other people, or China was never, in my opinion, their number one thing that, you know, especially in America when there actually weren't that many Chinese people, right? So I think with this is like there's an understanding that just being shown up or humiliated, at least in their eyes, just one time, is dangerous to the entire sort of structure, because it is a sort of an emperor has no clothes thing where, you know, I think people, even victims of the white supremacy notion, still fall prey to the belief that white supremacy is backed by power. That that they're supreme, that they're not only believe in their supremacy, but they actually are in material terms white supremacists. And I've always thought that China is very interesting. It has absolutely presented a material rebuttal of white supremacy, the sense that only white civilizations or whatever can achieve this level of technological, become peer competitors with a white superpower like the United States. It has presented a material challenge. That's why I think we're seeing this attack on the character of Chinese people, because what they can't not allow is a challenge to the moral basis of white supremacy. Not only, it's not just that we're more powerful than you, it's that we're also more moral and we're better people than you, we're more civilized. And I think that Serpensa video is kind of a concession to say, okay, we can no longer just pretend that we're the richest anymore, because obviously there's fucking rich Chinese people, billionaires everywhere. We can't outdo them materially, but we know that we're still better people. We have to maintain this notion that we're just fundamentally better, that they're evil or they're pre-modern. You know, that's the key. That's another leg of white supremacy that's being challenged, and they're defending it.
I think there's one point that really drives that home also. In that same video where he was talking about the apartheid, every time he spoke about rich Chinese people, like, for example, he said rich Chinese people, and then he looked to the side and he was like, stupid rich people. And then when he was talking about what black people in South Africa are buying, stupid lavish homes, at the end of that video, because they were driving through Beverly Hills, they started gushing over the homes in Beverly Hills. They're like, oh, look at these beautiful manicured lawns, these beautiful big houses, you know. And it was like, all of a sudden, like, their opinion of rich people when it was rich Americans totally changed, and it drove it home. So I think, you know, that's an important point. The first time he was humiliated and realized that he potentially lacked this privilege that he was supposed to have is when he didn't have the same privilege that his parents and his grandparents might have had in I don't know how many generations he's been in South Africa, that they had in South Africa. And, you know, he doesn't have as much of an outlet. He doesn't have as much of an opportunity to talk about black people the same way that he can talk about Asian people right now, you know, because as we said earlier, that's a no-no. But if he could, I'll share some of his quotes and some of his thumbnails. If he could, you know, for example, like this is one of his thumbnails from his videos where he's like basically dehumanizing. He wants to put a photo of a Chinese guy picking his nose. If a lot of his videos were about black people like this, you know, and talking down to black people, I mean, they would be all over him. That would be unacceptable. You know, here's another quote from him: "Are Chinese men cowards? I don't think so, but they keep doing cowardly things." You know, or here's another one: "Chinese people seem very heartless," because they are. You know, like, it's like, this is what he focuses on. If he did the same kind of a barrage, if he suddenly started talking about the African American community in the U.S. like this, you know, talking about stereotypes, talking about you know, behavior types, or, you know, foods that they like, or if he does these stereotypes, even if it was something more mild, like saying, oh, black people like fried chicken and all this kind of stuff, like pulling out all of these stereotypes or something like that, he'd be in some really, really big trouble. But right now it seems like but he is this incredibly racist person who has lost his privilege in life, and now he has this outlet that is, you know, this rise in xenophobia. He has this outlet for his racism, and he seems like a pig in shit now. That's what it comes across like for me.
Yeah, I think it goes to what we said earlier. There's not much consequences to anti-Asian racism in the United States. You know, he like you said, if you said this thing about black people or African American, he will be canceled. He will be deplatformed. People will be pillarizing him. You know, tar and feathered. He'll be tar and feathered. But But no, he makes a lot of money from making anti-Chinese videos, because that's still remain one acceptable form of racism, and that's why we're here talking about it today.
Carl, you know what that video looked like? It looked like two dudes cruising around, passing the copium around. Here, hit this, bro. Hit the copium. Oh,
they did. Yeah,
ooh,
his buddy did a video recently on the reaction from the Alaska talks. I don't usually watch their videos, but a lot of people send me little clips. They're like, "Oh my god, did you see this?" And he was talking about how China really. They overplayed their cards. They really were out of place. It was like you really got the sense that it was like China didn't stay in their place where they were supposed to be. How dare they talk about American social issues? We're supposed to do that to them, not to us. And it goes into a thing, because when I was on that panel, the Xinjiang panel, I was asked the question whether Bob Rae, a Canadian politician, should be allowed into, should be invited more actively into Xinjiang to tour and everything like that, and make sure everything's okay, go into the vocational training centers if they still exist, and also the prisons. And I said, yeah, they should. I mean, they extended the same invite to. They extended the same invite to Pompeo, who was really pushing this. They said, come over, come and visit. So I said, I think it's fine. But I said, I think there's something really important you should think about also to give yourself some perspective. And that is, would you be okay with, so this was a Canadian viewer, so I said, would you be okay if Chinese officials from Beijing came into the native communities in Canada to see what's going on and making sure you guys are doing a good job? Are you going to be okay with Chinese officials being invited into the cages on the border, to see how you're treating the immigrants there? Are you okay if they go into the California system where it seems like there's a systematic sterilization of black women to do their inspections and make sure you guys are doing all right? I said, I suspect the answer is no, that's a ridiculous. Why would we allow that to happen? And it starts to allow you to examine your own superiority complex, that this really is about China knowing their place. I said, and in fact, if you think those things are okay, then that's great. We get the relationship to an honest, equal level, and then maybe we really can collaborate. Maybe China can learn to treat its ethnic minorities better based on some experiences of the West. I highly doubt it. And maybe Canada can finally bring clean running water to the Inuit communities that have been complaining for 30 years that they don't have clean running water, something that China has been able to do in the most remote areas. Yeah, we could collaborate really well. But that's the sense I got with the Alaska thing is, whoa, China stepped out of line. They weren't supposed to say things that were equally, critical of us. We're supposed to be critical of them. That's not what this meeting is supposed to be about. It's very revealing where people think that China's supposed to exist in society here.
This may be a little bit off track, but what my impression of the Alaska meeting is, before I was hoping this is going to be a reset opportunity for the two sides sit down and talk. When I watched the video, though, when I watch Blinken talk, I realized he's not speaking to the Chinese. He's not trying to communicate to the Chinese. He's making a statement, a prepared statement for the press, for the media sound bites. He's showing that, yes, we're taking a tough stand against China. We're being tough with China, right? And unexpectedly, China started to respond to his statement. And whoa, then it's like, whoa, you guys are not supposed to do your wolf warrior diplomacy here. We are here trying to communicate. Why are you being so aggressive?
Carl, it's funny that they call it wolf, because I know it comes from the movie, but it's never struck me as particularly accurate, because what I'm hearing, at least as an American, what I'm seeing from China diplomatically is a warning to say, like, we've drawn clear red lines. We have it's a thing. Like, we can't not retaliate if this happens. Like, if you meddle in Taiwan, if this thing happens, like, we are going to go. This is a red line. Don't cross it. And to me, it is a very loud warning, a fair warning, to say it is really not in your interest to do this. And the closer you get to this red line, the more we're going to warn you, because it's going to be bad. That doesn't sound like a wolf. A wolf, that's an animal that feels in danger, is threatened, and is giving off warnings. It's a growling cat. A wolf stays quiet. They call it wolf warrior diplomacy. I'm like, wolves are silent. They stalk. They don't talk loud shit. Like, when I hear the diplomats saying this stuff, it doesn't seem to be like a wolf, like, wolves are quiet hunters.
But they want to... They want to tie China with being like predatory, right? They're always
Yes,
trying
exactly. It just doesn't make any sense though, because I don't see China being predatory here. I see this as a warning to America, like, don't do this. It's going to be a problem.
I like what one of my followers on Twitter tweeted. He said, even if you want to call it wolf warrior democracy, he says wolf warrior democracy is a great way to deal with rabid dog democracy. Because that's all they're doing. They're like, hey guys, come on, let's have some perspective here. I think it's very valuable. You know what? We've unless you had some other things, we're running past the 2-hour mark. I wanted to maybe potentially, I don't know if we're going to have any good ideas, but potentially wrap this up with some potential advice or ideas, or like what can people do? How can we tackle this issue? I mean, I think from my part, thinking a little bit more about it's unfortunate that if somebody wants to criticize a country, that it then affects the people of that dissent in your own country. I don't think that link should happen at all. But since it is, and since the fact that a lot of this propaganda is fake, to start thinking a little bit more critically about it. Pay attention to why you have to be on one side or the other. You can't question these narratives without, if it's the case of Xinjiang, try asking some critical questions to some people. Watch how quickly you're called a genocide denier. Why are we still doing this George Bush, you're either with us or against us thing that we were supposed to learn from, and also the propaganda that surrounded that era with the weapons of mass destruction, the fake atrocity stories and things like that. So start to think a little bit more critically about this stuff and pay attention to what's showing up in all of these kinds of documents when people are talking about the China threat. Hidden carefully inside a lot of these documents is we need to increase our military spending. It's like, I remember when Biden was first coming to power, and I said, his staff is being stacked with a lot of ex-defense guys, a lot of ex-military industrial complex guys. This is going to be interesting to see what happens. And what's happening is people are pushing for more military spending, using it as an excuse for that. There was an excellent piece by did you guys see that piece by Fareed Zakaria, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly?
Yes, it was a very good piece. It
was amazing when they compared to like more military spending because of China. Let's compare how much we're spending compared to China. If China was in NATO, they would be berated for spending less than the minimum 2% of their,
I thought the
military.
Brilliant comparison was the 1.7 trillion that we spent on the F-35 versus the 1.7 trillion that China invested into the BRI. And Fareed Zakaria correctly characterized the BRI as an investment in infrastructure, in civil engineering projects, in the improvement of it's an investment in people. And the F-35 is a piece of shit jet that doesn't work. And he said, that's your money. So you decide what you want to do with your money, because what we're doing is wasting it on a fucking F-35 that doesn't fly properly. I thought that was a very powerful piece.
And BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, is actually building roads, ports, rails, in infrastructures in global South.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But U.S. media is trying to turn that into China is a neo-imperialist, neo-colonialist power.
Yeah. So I thought Fareed Zakaria would take a good moment where the U.S. is now, the Democrats have proposed a massive infrastructure bill, $3 trillion plus. And I think it was a good sign. I think that there are mainstream people in the U.S. that are trying to turn away from unproductive aggression, and part of it is that we understand that America has to do some fucking house cleaning if it wants to if it wants to even survive as a society. Honestly,
right. And actually the anti-war, there's plenty of people who are anti-war in the U.S., but they've done a really good. That's something they've done a really good job in separating, that this anti-China propaganda has nothing to do with pro-war. They're trying to do this. Meanwhile, obviously, when you look at, for example, in Australia, ASPI, they're funded by the military industrial complex, and they are one of the biggest producers of anti-China propaganda. And then afterwards, they sell weapons equipment from their sponsors, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, all these companies, to then counter the China threat story that they just finished manufacturing. Like, this stuff should be clear as day. So I think people need to draw those things together. There hasn't been a good job in separating attacks on Asians with anti-China propaganda, but there's been an excellent separation of pro-war, military industrial complex profiteering and anti-China rhetoric. Oh, they've separated that really well, but the two things go together really closely. So my kind of recommendation to people would be to look at this a little bit more. And again, I realize this is a difficult thing for Asian Americans to stand up against anti-China propaganda when you're in a position where society is forcing you to distance yourself from China, where even in Australian Parliament, people are asking Australian-born of Chinese descent politicians to denounce the Chinese Communist Party. It's like, what is going on here? So I realize that's a difficult thing for Asian Americans to do at this point in time, because it may seem like that's going to get you in even more trouble. But for people who aren't, if there are white people who are watching this, start thinking a little bit more critically about that and start putting pressure on your politicians to not blindly go along with this. When Canada did the vote to call what was going on in Xinjiang a genocide, I reached out to 80 MPs, members of parliament, and they either ignored me or declined my request. There was one guy, one MP, Scott Atchison, who agreed to come on my show. And then it was planned about a week in advance. And a few hours beforehand, they started asking me questions about my channel. Obviously, they looked me up and then they canceled. They said, no, we're not going to come on your show. And no, we're not interested in rescheduling, because all of a sudden it might have been, I probably would have asked some difficult questions of him. Start putting pressure on obviously these politicians, they're voting for something they've got no idea about. They've got no clue. They're confident enough to call that a genocide. They're confident enough to prop up the idea of boycotting the Beijing Olympics, but they're not confident enough to answer some potentially difficult questions. I think that says a lot also. So standing up against what is imperialist propaganda, which is lining the pockets of the military industrial complex, would help in reducing these tensions, and also help with getting politicians to do something for you guys instead of lining the pockets of the military industrial complex. I can't think of anything. I mean, this is a tricky. I don't know if you guys have any kind of thoughts on what people can do, or some thoughts and ideas for people who are affected by this.
I think that's a great point, Daniel, you raised. I think it will be a lot easier to build a coalition again, kind of the anti-war, making the anti-war argument, the anti-imperialism argument in United States by pointing out, hey, look, our tax dollars are not being used productively. We actually need investment in domestic infrastructure, in our healthcare. We should maybe cut back on our defense spending. I think that has a broad appeal across, much of the U.S. population, but because that in turn ties into reducing the xenophobia, because a lot of the xenophobia has been driven by think tanks, by the media that's working for the military industrial complex for the sole purpose of manufacturing tension with China, so they can continue their grift. So it's good to point out that grift, that connection, and ask the Americans, like, look, we don't really need a confrontation with China. What we need is schools, hospitals. We need railways. We need highway infrastructures.
Yeah. That's exactly why the poverty alleviation documentary had to be censored, had to be taken off of PBS, because it's like, holy crap, we can't show China's doing this much good for their people when our politicians are people, as Adam Curtis says, are no longer politicians who deliver dreams to their people, but who protect them from nightmares. And of course, that means they have to manufacture nightmares. It's very difficult to call China a nightmare when they're doing this for their poor population, while more and more people are suffering and being evicted in the U.S. I mean, it's all a part of this whole thing.
Yeah, at the same time, I think as Asian Americans, me, team, like, we need to be more aggressive to calling out instance of anti-Asian racism, because this is, the American culture is the one that, if you don't speak out for yourself, if you don't make it a big ruckus, they will just take it as they'll just take it for granted. They were just gonna bulldoze over you. You are meek. You are nobody. and I think this right now, it's a good start that now there's more Asian American activism focused on this the hate crime issue, and also as Asian Americans, we need to speak to the Asian. I will call the Asian American pounded class aristocracies, these identity grifters who have been, mostly using identity issue to increasing their own clout rather than speaking about the real issue of violence that's facing the Asian Americans. You know who I'm talking about, Teen. The people who are trying to distract from the very real issues of grandmas and grandpas getting attacked just for looking Asian because they look like easy target. But these Asian American identity grifters are trying to distract the issue, by making it about our Asian privilege or our supposedly our white adjacency. I mean, that bullshit needs to be stopped. We need to call that out. Go ahead, T.
Oh no, I think I back everything you guys are saying, and I think that it's not surprising that we're starting to agree, because I think the picture has become more clear. And one thing I would advise is something I've learned myself, is that Asians are this is not an Asian issue. What's going on? This is not about Asian people. This is about history and the way white supremacist thinking has come to pervade it, and it's also about not the overwhelming presence of white supremacy. It's actually about white supremacy starting to recede, and a very forceful paroxysm of violence in reaction to it falling away. So this is actually a good time in that sense. And I think that Asians, in a way, we're experiencing it now because of that recession. It's going away, and we have finally seen it because it can no longer remain hidden. And so that makes it, we can't think of it just as anti-Asian violence. We can't just think of it in terms of, China versus the US. We can't just think of it as, how dare white people flex on us Asians? We Asians, no, this is not about us. This actually connects us to the rest of the world, and how this was done to what they call the global South. It's connected to how it was, South Asians were treated, Africans were treated, Arabs were treated, Latin Americans were treated, indigenous populations have all been victimized by this. And in a way, I think to see Asians wake up to this is almost like it could be, it's not the straw that breaks the camel's back. It could be like the hemisphere that breaks the camel's back. If people, not just Asian Americans, but Asians around the world, understand this and not take it too personally, not internalize this as something about us. We are being drawn into a game here that has been played by the entire world's people, and we have to see ourselves as participants in a much bigger fight than just for our own honor and dignity. And that, I think, connects us with other people, and it's an empowering thing. It's not a depressing or sad thing.
Right. Yeah. No, I think there's some interesting things there to think about. I think we're going to see a lot of right now. The environment is good. There's a big spotlight on Asian racism right now. So making sure you make the most of it, as Carl was saying, making a bit of noise about it when you do experience problems is going to be really important. I think the interesting point you made about it's a loss of privilege. It's a loss of white supremacy. I think you're going to probably see a lot of really interesting things around that. You may gain some new allies who previously were not allies, and you may lose some also. I'll explain that in a second. I think I remember seeing online there was a white guy who was talking about the fact that he's racist and it's something he struggles with and he doesn't like it and he wants to change himself. And I don't remember why people jumped on him for it. But it's like people maybe thought he was looking for sympathy or something like that, and they just totally roasted him. And I said, that's an amazing thing to admit and to start facing if you can gain some more allies that way. I know actually he also knows the Serpentzier guy, because that Serpentzier guy, he used to be in Shenzhen here, and I know one of his South African friends, and he said the same thing about himself. He says, I grew up in South Africa. You got to understand, I grew up basically being trained to be racist, and I have racist thoughts and racist ideas, and it's something I struggle with every day, and it's something I want to change. So be open-minded to these people, but you might lose some allies also, because you know what? Like that guy I said who made the Ching Chong Bing Long t-shirt company, you know, it's like, this is a guy who's, you know, Antifa, he wears Black Lives Matter t-shirts and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, when he's pretending to be this hero of the people, he realizes maybe he really thinks Chinese people were racist towards him at one point. Maybe he really believes he had a racist experience. All of a sudden, he says, whoa, hold on a second. Now I'm going to align myself with the KKK. I want them to buy my t-shirts and stuff like that. That seems like it almost epitomizes what you're talking about. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. I'm against racism and everything like that. But you know what? I'm getting a little bit too uncomfortable with this loss of privilege thing. You know, if racism, you know, while we're sorting this racism thing out, if it's going to happen in this direction. Okay, guys? You know, that's the sense I got from it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from here, how the transformations that take place in society. But it's an opportune time to expand the awareness of racism beyond the groups that were protected more than others. And it's important to note also, those other groups that were protected before, they still haven't beat racism at all also. I mean, it still exists. But it's good to see we're getting a little bit more attention around the Asian racism issue, especially with how much it's been increasing over the past year, and how concerning it's getting. Especially because I think that the anti-China propaganda is only going to increase from here also. So guys, prepare yourself for that.
Yeah, again, it's, you know, I would say, I mean, I'm trying to say this more, is that it's not anti-Asian racism. It's just fucking racism.
Right.
It's just racism directed at Asian people, but it's the same racism as directed to all other people. And so we don't want to make it about we shouldn't make it about us specifically, but about how we are, participants now in something bigger. That should be very empowering.
I just wanted to follow up on what Teen said earlier. Right now the era of white supremacy and even white majority in the United States is sunsetting, because there's statistics projections saying by 2047 U.S. will no longer be a white majority country, right? But that is why that's prompting a lot of anxiety and fear on the side of the white folks about losing that privilege. That's why we're seeing the lashback, the strong reaction. What I want to say is, not just by the mere fact that the current minority population in U.S. is growing. It's going to grow to a point where it's surpassing. The white majority will no longer be the majority in 2047. Doesn't by itself guarantee that everything is going to be kumbaya from here on. We are likely to see even more violent reaction from those people who are losing out their former privilege. So we should brace ourselves. We should brace ourselves for that. That means maybe speak out more, get organized, right, and form coalitions. We all need to prepare ourselves for that eventuality and understand the dynamic, what is driving this more violent expression of racism. So that's
I mean, you got to understand that. I mean, this is what the country was founded on. When the white population squeezed out the natives from the Western Territory and basically started squeezing them into places like Oklahoma. Oklahoma they tried to become a state, but they couldn't become a state because there were too many natives. And the idea of having a native, a representative or a senator from Oklahoma in Washington, D.C. was just, there was no way that they wanted that to happen. Oklahoma managed to become a part of the U.S., become a state, receive statehood after they got the population down to 1/3 native. So the country was established and founded by making sure that the white settlers had a strong enough kind of hold on everything. And so now with the idea that they could possibly be losing that, I think you're going to see some of the dirty side, the not so nice side of America come out again, with people being afraid of that. I hope I'm wrong on that. I hope that there's enough people that appreciate a multicultural society. But I think we're seeing the early signs of exactly that happening. And as Teen said, it's not anti-Asian racism; it's just racism in general. And it's as you said, an era of kind of white supremacy losing its hold. Yeah. So do you guys want to wrap up on that? Yeah. Go
That was
ahead.
a really good discussion.
No,
it's 2.5 hours. Yeah. It's good to talk. It's good talking about it.
Yeah, this is good. Yeah. If you guys, did you have anything else you want to say? We covered a lot. I think we pretty much covered everything.
No,
we
Daniel, I
wanted to
really
say.
appreciate that you thought that you wanted to cover this topic because again, it's not a niche topic. It's a linchpin topic in my opinion in terms of larger flow of history, right? Like it's Asian people finding themselves participating in history in a meaningful way. It's good. So I'm glad you covered it.
Yeah. I mean, it's always, when the things were happening against the brown community after 9/11 and stuff like that, it's not something I particularly, it's like, okay, we'll get through this. But I think it's important for other people also who have been, who have been the target before to speak out when it's not your own group also. And I think the experiences that a lot of the Asian American community are experiencing now, the next time they see this, when someone else is the target, if it's another ethnic group, it increases the likelihood of them coming out to support them and saying, no, we've seen this.
No more
before.
John Hughes. No more fucking John Hughes in the Asian American community, right? No more of that. If people know who that is, look it up.
I don't know who that is.
He wrote the torture memo for Bush.
Oh shit! Yeah, fuck that.
It reminds me actually of talking about the communities coming together, especially communities who have been victimized at different points in time. Yeah, I remember. I mean, I was really, really interested in the topic of racism against Muslims or people who are brown during this previous era. And I remember when the big scare was about Muslims, when everybody was saying, "Oh, Obama is a Muslim," that was in the beginning when he was running for election, right? And I remember Republicans even stood up against that. There were like John McCain, he was in a town hall meeting and somebody stood up and said, "Oh, I'm scared. He's a Muslim," and stuff like that. And John McCain said, no, he's not a Muslim. He's a good man. And the most ironic, the person who said it the best was one of the biggest war criminals of American history. But I got to give him credit for this. When Colin Powell was on a show, he said, "You know what? This conversation is going the wrong way. It's like, people are saying Obama is a Muslim, and other people are saying no, he's not." He's like, "That's not the conversation. The conversation is, so what? So what if he's a Muslim? Why does it matter?" Oddly, Colin Powell, who has his fair share of Muslim blood on his hands, said it best then. And so the communities, all communities should come together to fight this, whether you're specifically affected right now or not.
Yeah, no more Andrew Yang rhetoric. How Andrew Yang said, "Oh, we gotta be more American." No, fuck that. We're already American.
Yeah, we're red, white, and blue. Yeah,
we don't need to prove shit to nobody. I mean, what he's saying is somehow we're less than other Americans. No, fuck that. We are Americans. We don't need to prove shit to nobody. We need to stand up for our rights. That's a fundamental American things to do, to fucking stand up for your rights. Yeah,
absolutely. It's not only a matter of tolerance for people, but it's a tolerance for ideas. And what he was promoting was saying, make sure you have the right ideals, make sure you have the right ideas, make sure you are American enough so that you're not targeted. It's like, no, you've lost the plot. That's not what it's supposed to be about. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that was it was amazing. 2.5 hours. We this was a good discussion, but we should get together on another topic eventually soon. But thanks a lot for joining, guys, and I hope our viewers enjoyed this and got a little something out of this. Definitely leave your thoughts and ideas in the comments. This is a kind of a really new thing that's happening, and I think there's probably a lot of people out there that have some good ideas and thoughts on the topic as well. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll see you in the next show. See you, Carl. See you, team.
Daniel.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.